Good evening, everybody. I'll say it again. Good evening, everybody. Thank you. Thank you for coming to the meeting of the State Street Advisory Committee, August 21st, 2023. My name is David Davis. I am the chair of this honorable group, and today we will basically start with a roll call of the members of SSAC here today. Could I have a roll call, please?
Chair Dave Davis.
I couldn't hear you there, Greta. You're not on.
Chair Dave Davis.
Here.
Vice Chair Saxon.
Here.
Michael Becker.
Here.
Diane Meester-Black.
Here.
Hillary Blackerby.
Here.
Roxana Bonderson.
Roxana's
present.
absent.
Marge Caffarelli.
We have a hard time hearing you, Greta.
If the committee could just give us a couple moments, we're just working on the technical side. Just give us a minute.
Here.
All right, let's start back.
I can call roll and she can just record it. 'Cause I think people can hear me.
I think right now the mics are good. So Greta, do you want to continue?
Sure. Marge Caffarelli.
I can't hear her.
Here. Roger Durling. I'm here. Nadra Ehrman. Robin Elander.
Here.
Megan Harmon. Not present.
I think she's online.
Megan Harmon. I don't hear her.
Is she unmuted?
She was. Megan Harmon.
Keep going, Greta.
Hi.
Mike Jordan.
Here.
Ed Lundvik.
Here.
Peter Lewis.
He's remote.
Peter Lewis.
Yeah, he said, I
He's
heard
online.
him. He's here.
Thank you. Kristen Miller. Here. Kristen Snedden. Here. Suzanne Tejada.
Susanna's not here yet. Okay, thank you very much for that. That takes us to item 2. This is preliminary matters. Okay, preliminary matters. Item A, opening remarks and announcements. I want to apologize for my back being to the audience. Apparently, with the technical things going on here, this is the best configuration we could do. And when you do speak, I will do my best for us here at the table to turn and listen to you. So, my apologies up front in that regard. I want to start with just a personal comment complimenting the staff and our consultants on the amount of public outreach that they have done up to this date. And I know some of you have been involved, but I don't know that you really see the extent of the involvement that has happened here, both in terms of the SSAC meetings with community groups out in the community itself, and the amount of written comments that we get every week from members of the community with incredibly fantastic suggestions relative to the future of downtown. And I must say, everyone essentially contributes in a way that is so positive to the future of our precious downtown. So I also want to compliment the community for staying involved in a process which has gone fairly slowly to date, but I believe is going to absolutely accelerate from this point forward. And we've heard quite a lot during this period of time, and I would like to ask Vice Chair Saxon if he'd kind of give a little run through as to what we've heard, what are the important points that we've taken away from that, kind of point us in the direction of the meeting that we're going to hold today. Ken?
Thanks, Dave, and fellow committee members. Great to see you in person, and to the members of the public who are here. Some of you may have seen that Dave and I drafted an op-ed in The Independent in early July, And our goal was, as Dave said, we've had so many opportunities to listen to thousands and thousands of members of the public in our process in many different ways. And Dave and I felt that there are some areas where there is a growing, I mean, there's never 100% agreement, but where there's growing areas of consensus, and we wanted to point them out because downtown is a big, complex area that touches on almost every piece of civic life. It can get very complicated, and so we tried to point out some of these things. And at the beginning of the meeting here, I wanted to reiterate some of the high points that we were hearing. So to begin with, we identified 3 key issues that feel central to a revitalized and redesigned downtown: mobility, housing, and districts. And I'd like to touch on each of them briefly. In terms of mobility, you've heard us say before, but in our survey, 79% of respondents say they like the absence of cars on State Street, and they want to retain that. Though I will say that the particular length of the desired closure wasn't specified in the survey. Now, of course, the street closure was made on an emergency basis, and so now it's time to think this all through for the future, recommending which blocks should remain closed to private vehicles, where to prioritize a pedestrian promenade, where bicycles can be safely channeled, and how we move people around downtown. And we need to propose a street design that supports all this activity and movement. So we'll be talking about these topics at our next 2 SSAC meetings. Secondly, housing. We have a long downtown Main Street corridor and a good deal more retail and office space than is needed for the foreseeable future. Our area's biggest space need is housing, which currently makes up no more than 5% of the square footage in our downtown master plan area. That's a very small number right now. As more space is converted to housing, downtown Santa Barbara has the chance to evolve into a desirable urban neighborhood with more people present all times of day, which will be a source of a new level of vibrancy for the area. The need for downtown housing is one of the most frequent comments we've heard from Santa Barbarans of all stripes. To support this shift to more housing, we're going to need to address obstacles and opportunities regarding converting downtown real estate to housing. And third, districts. Santa Barbara is not going to be vibrant as one long downtown shopping street anymore. In our process, many have suggested ways that we build on the informal zones or districts that already exist downtown. Towards the north end of our project area, Santa Barbara has a pretty vibrant arts district. The Old Town district at the south end of our project area is pretty vibrant today as an entertainment zone, though many have pointed out that we need to better integrate the 400 block into that zone. And in between those 2 zones, we have our city center, which today is the least vibrant part of the street closure, but there are exciting possibilities for the future. It's our work to think about what State Street could be in that city center area, as well as integrating those ideas with redevelopment possibilities for De La Guerra Plaza and for Paseo Nuevo. We'll be focusing on some of those district questions at today's meeting. In the op-ed, we also mentioned some other critical themes we hear a lot about. Certainly the areas of safety and sanitation. I'm talking about cleanliness, lighting, homelessness, accessibility, and bicycle safety and speed. Also creating design standards that build on and enhance the beauty of Santa Barbara: street design, landscape design, and outdoor dining design. And highlighting the need for process reform, streamlining and reforming city rules and review processes so that private property and business owners can more quickly and easily invest in changes that will help revitalize our downtown center. So that's an overview of what we wrote, summarizing what we've been hearing. Our upcoming SSAC meetings are set up to invite our input and guidance on these key questions as we support the development of a master plan vision that can go before the City Council early next year.
Thank you, Ken. Next, on item B, agenda review, I'd like to call on State Street Master Planner Tess Harris. Tess, could you give us an overview of tonight's agenda?
Yes, thank you, Chair Davis. Good afternoon, everybody. So we have one item on today's agenda, and that is the vision and concepts for the State Street Promenade. We're going to go through the presentation about the vision and concepts for each district and for the overall promenade. And it's important to note that as we go through the vision and the concepts during each district, that you're going to see a 20-foot fire lane or 20-foot corridor that will be empty in all of the concepts that you see today. That is on purpose. What we are here today to really talk about are the districts and what the districts should feel like, what you want to experience in each district. And we will touch on the transportation and mobility discussion during our next two meetings, as Ken stated earlier. So we're not going to discuss the transportation component today, and I ask that the committee members hold those comments when you see each of the different concepts for each district to the next meeting. We'll go into a lot of detail, and it will require at least the next two meetings for that. That's all. We have a meaty agenda item, and then I'll walk through what our schedule looks like in a moment as well.
Good, thank you very much, Tess. It takes us to item 2C. This is the approval of the minutes for May 22nd and May 24th, 2023. Anyone have any comments, questions on either of those two minutes? Not hearing any. Do I have a motion to approve? I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
And a second. You want to speak to
Can
the
we
motion?
do them separately? Because I was at one meeting but not the other, so I can't vote on both of them.
Okay, we will take those separately. Let's do roll call on the May 22nd meeting minutes.
Diane Meester Black,
Abstain.
Hillary Blackerby,
Aye.
Roxanna Bonderson, not present, Roger Durling, Nadra Erman, not present, Robin Elander,
Yes.
Megan Harmon,
Yes. Can you guys hear me? Nope. Nobody can hear me again. Can anyone hear me?
we can hear you, thank you.
Oh, yes. Okay. Thank you. Yes.
Mike Jordan, Ed Lundvig,
Yes.
Peter Lewis,
Yes.
Yes.
Kristen Miller,
Yes.
Kristen Snedden, Suzanne Tejada,
Yes.
Chair Davis,
Yes.
Vice Chair Saxon.
Let's do the same for the minutes of May 24th.
Hillary Blackerby,
Aye.
Roxanna Bonderson, not present, Roger Durling, Nadra Erman, not present, Robin Elander, Megan Harmon,
Yes.
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 Mike Jordan, Ed Lundvig,
Yes.
Peter Lewis,
Yes.
Kristen Miller,
Yes.
Kristen Snedden, Suzanne Tejada,
Yes.
Diane Meester Black,
Yes.
Chair Davis,
Yes.
Vice Chair Saxon.
The minutes are approved. Going to item 2D, this is general public comment for items that are not on our agenda today. That's pretty hard. So if you have something there you want to speak under general public comment on something which is related to what we do, but not on today's agenda, and today's agenda is pretty wide, you'll have to hold those comments. Tess, do you want to elaborate on that?
Yes, thank you, Chair Davis. I just want to reiterate that if you do have comments on the vision or concepts for the State Street Master Plan project area, that you hold those comments until after item A when we discuss that item. I also wanted to highlight that the State Street Promenade Pilot Programs Committee, which is a newly forming committee related to the interim ad hoc State Street Committee, is going to council tomorrow for formation. That's a committee that's going to be focusing on pilot programs and looking at pilot opportunities for State Street today. So if you have comments related to pilot programs or what you're hoping to see out on State Street in the very near future, I would really encourage you or hope that you consider making those comments to the council committee that will be formed tomorrow. So with that, let's open up public comment. I have a couple speakers in the room. For everybody that's in the room, if you would like to speak under general public comment, if you could fill out a blue slip in the back and then bring it up to me, that would be appreciated. I will start in the room and then go over to Zoom. So the first public comment that I have is Barbara Flanagan. Barbara, if you could come up to the podium and use the microphone so that the members of the public that are remote can hear as well.
Yeah, thank you for calling my name. And I'd like to ask if the committee and if the public, and thank you for the amazing democratic process that you conducted. If you talked about this plan, the process as a recruiting process of establishing the fact that there is just about no one walking down State Street, spending money or not, and who do we want actually to be there? If it's going to be housing, it'll be older people, parents, children. It'll be interestingly chaotic, and I don't see any chaos here particularly. And also, should it be Latinos, newly arrived, longtime residents? Should it be European travelers and tourists, people coming from cruise ships, people coming from Los Angeles? Who do you want those people to be walking down State Street, and what exactly are they doing if not shopping? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Remember, we want to keep this if we can. The item's not today. That's part of the vision and would normally be under the other item. Anybody else wish to speak under general public comment not related to the mission and concepts we're going to talk about today?
I have a few more speaker slips. Marilyn Loper-Fido.
Well, I ask them if this is where they want to speak now or later.
It looked like you had mentioned both. Would you like to speak now, or?
Oh, she's going to hold her comment. Thank you very much.
And then I have Randolph Everett. Did you wish to speak now or under item 3? Okay.
Great. Yes, sir.
Hi, my name is Randy Everett, and I just want to say we need humanized bathrooms for the community, for visitors from Japan, Los Angeles, San Francisco, and San Diego, and for the buyers, the shoppers, the people eating food, and for you. That's all.
Good comment. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And then I have Lisa Burns. Lisa, would you like to speak now or later? Okay, thank you. And then we'll move, if there are no other members of the public in the audience, I'll move over to online. Greta, do we have any online public commenters?
We do have a speaker online who has a raised hand. Jim Marston, if you'd like to speak now or wait until general public comment, let us know. I'm going to unmute you and allow you to speak. Jim Marston, go ahead.
Okay, can you hear me now?
We can.
Good, okay. As a person with a visual disability, I moved downtown about 30 years ago to take advantage of the great service from the MTD and also to be able to use the shuttle to do my shopping up and down State Street, and also to be able to go to the Amtrak station, the harbor, Stearns Wharf, the beach, and other activities in town. Almost 3.5 years ago, the city abruptly canceled the shuttle service. This is greatly reducing the activity choices for many, or for the very people the city is trying to attract, the people who live here without a car. Any urban planner knows that you cannot have a vital downtown area without sufficient public transit. Canceling the shuttle has vastly decreased the activity space for those people. If we want to attract more residents downtown without a vehicle, and also to attract visitors out of town, we must have accessible shuttle transit service to the Amtrak and the other amenities in town. How can we expect visitors to come downtown without using a car? We can't wait until the promenade is actually built. We must have a shuttle that is accessible to all. It can run up and down Chapala and Anacapa, and then to the waterfront. I hope you can add this to whatever surveys you conduct in the future, and that this group will consider how important a vibrant transit system will increase the downtown. Thank you for considering this issue, as it has affected the lives of many people in town for far too long. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And we do have a second speaker with a raised hand. Patrick Casey, I'll unmute you, and you should be able to speak.
Hi, good afternoon. I understand that today's meeting, there will be no discussion related to transportation and will solely focus on the vision, but what I don't understand is why. In the last committee meeting, when MIG made their first presentation on the opportunities for the new master plan, it was apparent that the committee was unaware of transportation laws and needs and how that would impact what can and can't be done on the promenade. Why would it seem necessary to continue the fairy tale and dream work session without first establishing what can and can't be done with transportation as it pertains to the law and accessibility? It just seems to be a waste of time and money to sit here and dream about what can or can't be done, especially when no one in this room has a clear understanding of what the transportation laws are, regardless of their position in the city staff or a council position. It's unusual that no one knows what the transportation rules are. To focus there first. Thank you.
Thank you.
I did receive one additional speaker slip. Chris Benedict, did you wish to speak during this item or during item 3? Okay, great. I'll hold yours till the next one.
Okay. Is that we will close general public comment at this point and go to agenda item 3A. This is vision and concepts for the State Street Promenade. As listed in the agenda, MIG Inc. and city staff will present an overall vision and concept for the State Street Promenade that is based on key themes heard during the community engagement process and prior to SSAC meetings. This will include defining 3 districts with unique identities and potential design elements. I want you to listen very carefully, because here's how I'm going to run this portion of the meeting. We're going to have a full staff presentation without interruptions. Following that, I'm going to go around the room and ask each of you for any clarifying questions, not comments, only clarifying questions on the presentation itself. No comments. We're going to do that in a second, you'll see. Clarifying questions by SSAC. I then go to general public comment and take public comment from everybody in the audience. I will bring it then back, close public comment, come back here, and go around the room for general SSAC comments, specifically on the items that Tess has asked us in the staff report to address tonight. I'm going to ask that the staff and the consultants compile what they hear from us into essentially a summary, and then we can discuss where that summary reflects basically our thoughts and ideas to move forward with. Okay? So with that, I will turn the meeting over to Tess Harris. Go ahead, Tess.
Great. Thank you, Chair Davis. Good afternoon, everybody. First, I wanted to introduce our consulting team, MIG. We have with us Matt Shawaker. Matt is their Director of Urban Design. And then we also have Bill Estes. Bill is our Senior Landscape Architect. And they will be walking through the concepts with us this afternoon. And I will start the presentation. So really, to kick us off, the presentation is going to talk about we're going to start out by talking about the goals for today's meeting. We're going to highlight areas of agreement that we have heard through prior SSAC meetings and community outreach. And then we're going to walk through the vision and the district concepts. The point here is that we're going to suggest throughout the different concepts that the overall space is actually potentially 3 different districts or 3 different areas. And that you will have different experiences as you go through each different space. This is a general outline for what we anticipate to come forward over the next few months. So as you'll see, there's a lot of work ahead. We are looking at, today we're really talking about the vision and concepts for the State Street Master Plan area. September, we are looking at a date, and I'll talk about that later at the end of this meeting. But we're gonna be talking through a transportation history and considerations that the State Street Advisory Committee should have as we think through the State Street Master Plan. That's a presentation that will be given by Public Works staff and was done at the recent TCC meeting as well. And then in early October, we're gonna have another meeting that's focused on mobility. And this will be a deep dive on transportation and mobility issues, including refined concepts and trade-offs. So getting the background and the really overall framework for transportation in September, and then coming back with some of the concepts that you'll see today in October with mobility and components included. Again in October 23rd, we have a regularly scheduled SSAC meeting. That will be a follow-up, so if we need to use that for continued discussion on transportation, we will do that. We're also going to be talking about some different conditions on the street, like stormwater and utilities, and use that meeting for a number of items. From mid-October to mid-December, I anticipate additional community outreach. That's also a point where if we need to add a meeting, I anticipate doing that in November. And then in December, our meeting is scheduled for December 11th, and we'll be talking through implementation and policy. All of that coming together, still really keeping us on track for going to City Council in early 2024 with an update, and then requesting approval of a concept for the State Street Master Plan by Council. All right, so starting out today's goals. So I want to highlight that Create State, the State Street Master Plan, is really a plan highlighting community space. The space as a venue. What can this place be, not only as a gathering location, but as an urban neighborhood? How do we re-identify our downtown into a space that all of us can enjoy, and residents and tourists can enjoy as well? And so in this staff memo that I sent out, we talked through the different components that this committee has talked about in the past. So the comments about it feels, it represents, it reflects. There's a number of things that we all discussed on what we want this master plan to really talk through. And then here's what we heard and we believe are central elements to the vision. So supporting additional housing units, maximizing neighborhood serving design elements, accommodating all age ranges and accessibility needs, making sure that the largest interventions are in the areas that need the most support, and highlighting areas of success and build on that success. Emphasizing 3 distinct districts, and we'll get into that in more detail today. And then highlighting at least one central plaza or central location within each of those districts. So finding a gathering space, not only one in the entire master plan area, but having a space in each of those districts to congregate. Accentuating connections to the Paseo network and recognizing that we have a lot of historic structures, we have a lot of landmarks, we have a lot of areas of interest, and making sure that we're not just going into one long and linear project, but building out and creating some depth there. And then connecting to other key institutions, including the waterfront and the Funk Zone. All right, so the elephant in the room, we've talked about this already, but I'm gonna keep highlighting it because it is important. So mobility is going to be key to creating a successful public space, but we really wanna focus on the district concept first. And we feel that it's important to make sure that we get that right, to make sure that we come out of this room, hopefully with general agreement on the 3 different districts and what we want each of those 3 different districts to represent. You're going to see a 20 to 20 foot mobility corridor again throughout the concepts, and that is intended, that is the fire lane location, but that area also can act as a space for vehicles, pedestrians, bikes, shuttles. That space can include not only one, but potentially multiple options. And again, that's what we'll discuss in September and October. So I really ask that we hold that the space to make sure that we get the foundation right, get the districts right so we can go to the next stage. So these are, again, some of the broad goals that we've defined. These were first identified by City Council, and then they were confirmed by the State Street Advisory Committee as well. So bringing people downtown, creating a safe experience, being people-centric, designing for locals, facilitating housing, ensuring economic revitalization, and reestablishing or recapturing downtown's identity. And so as we've agreed, the plan and the concepts really need to speak to each of these. And so I encourage you to think as we walk through each of them how we are capturing each of these in the different districts. And then housing, as you've heard sort of throughout, housing is essential, and it's no secret. We need more housing in our downtown to make this plan successful, but not only to make this plan successful, to also make our downtown successful, right? And so this slide here highlights the surface level parking lots. It also highlights Paseo Nuevo. And then in the smaller dots, it highlights suitable sites that were identified through the housing element. So there are opportunity sites identified, a little bit hard to see here, but in the pink and then the blue are pending projects in the space. The point of this slide is really to highlight that we need to be thinking about public space in the context of somebody's front door. What do you want to experience if you are living right downtown? So it can be for somebody that's a general resident of Santa Barbara, but we are also creating this new urban neighborhood. And so this is really a key piece to it. How does this public space project connect to potential housing that could exist in the future? And so I'm going to now go into some areas of agreement. What we've heard, and Ken, I think, did a great job in terms of the community feedback that we've heard so far, but really highlighting from the different design workshops, from the survey, from other engagement efforts, we've heard generally an interest in keeping at least a portion of State Street closed to vehicles, emphasizing this need for making a space for families and for people of all ages, providing diverse amenities and diverse seating, public and performing art spaces and public art spaces, and then activating the center blocks was really a key component that we've heard throughout, as well as housing, as I mentioned. Another area of agreement that we've heard is the idea that this space we have right now is really long and linear. And so if you add the 300 block and the 1300 block into this space, into the current closure we have today, it's about a mile in length. And so what you're going to hear from Matt and Bill is the solution or the idea of districts. How do we create that depth, build out the space, and really make sure we're connecting the districts to each other and then creating different identities for each district as well. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Matt to walk us through the different districts.
Okay. Can you hear me? Great. So as Ken said and said several times, really the foundation we believe in the vision starts with the districts. There are existing, we've heard this many times, districts that are defined already by their uses, the institutions, the destinations that already exist in them. This map sort of highlights the Arts District, Old Town, and what we've been calling the core. And as we've analyzed it and discussed it, we think there's sort of the strategy starts with two ideas how we approach those districts. The first, Arts and the Old Town, really we've called them amplify. We've heard many times from the committee, from the public, those areas are fairly successful already. There's good destinations and all the art, the institutions, the concentration of restaurants in Old Town, those places work pretty well. What we need to do is build on what's working in those districts, amplify it, provide spaces to broaden the invitation to more people, as you said, to all of Santa Barbara, all ages, all walks of life in those districts. So you'll see strategies to amplify and build on what's working well and broaden the invitation. In the core, we've heard very clearly through the public surveys and other conversations, that's an area that needs more intervention, more dramatic concepts and action. We call it catalyze. We need to catalyze new uses, new public life in that place to bring the city together there. So there's a couple different strategies and conversations we'll see as we go through each of the districts in that vein. A couple things, we'll go back real quick, I apologize. You'll see unique strategies special for each district in these as we go through them. You'll also see several things that are common to every district. Like, I'll give an example, as Tess said, connections to the Paseo network. You'll see ideas about how we connect to the Paseo network and what that means for public life activity on the street throughout all of the districts. But you'll see some other concepts that are unique to each district based on their unique characteristics. So with that, let's dive in. We're going to work from Old Town up to the Arts District. So we'll start with Old Town, and we sort of, I'll say and you guys have seen all these pictures already on the boards. We picked this sort of cover slide because it actually, to me, jumps out when I was here as a character-defining feature of Old Town, which are those incredible trees. So what you're going to see for each district, I just want to walk through the format. You see a vision statement. It's a high-level, very draft vision statement, some potential design elements, and then some images that sort of speak to the character and sort of vision and quality of the space. If you look closely, you'll see, there's probably a subtle shading about who's, I don't want to say who's invited because all Santa Barbarans and all walks of life are invited to every district, but who's there now and who do we want to add and bring to that space specifically? So Old Town, really, as I said, builds on what's working now. It's a vibrant entertainment district. It's really more active at night, connecting to the Funk Zone, the waterfront. It's got lively restaurants, a lot of street activity, street performance. We want to build on that, but build on it in a way that not only invites the people that are now, but makes it a great place for families, for seniors, for people from other parts that aren't currently using it. We can see some of the sort of key elements of that vision, expanding the patio spaces so they have more presence on the street, the tree canopy, building on that, and then adding social seating, fun ways of inhabiting the space, moments of joy, as we've called them, different types of lighting. So we'll go a little further. So what we're looking at here is sort of, a slightly aerial view on the right, Gutierrez Street, the 400 block, then the 500 and 600 block. I'll walk you through the legend. What we see is sort of basically color-coded the space, because what we really want to talk about is how we're using the space and how they are organized. So we've got a bright yellow corridor you see through the whole thing. That's a continuous 8-foot wide pedestrian sidewalk. Sorry. Oh, yeah. Thank you. So you see a continuous 8-foot sidewalk on both sides of the street that'll maintain pedestrian access throughout all of the blocks. You see in the center the light blue, which is the 20-foot corridor that Tess spoke of. And then you see dark blue on either side, which is really the amenity and activation space. And then light blue lines coming from the blocks on the north side or on the top of the sheet, which are the paseos. The last thing you see there is the red, which are two sort of red plazas, and we'll talk about them and what we think the potential for that idea is. The foundation of the Old Town, as we've talked about, is all the little knives and forks are existing today restaurants that populate the streets. So the density of restaurants in this district really animates it. The other thing that's maybe a little hard to see is there's a brighter green group of trees, which are the existing, as defined in current city information, sort of heritage large trees. So we think those are something to build on along with the restaurants. The concept you see here is, and I'll zoom in the next slide quickly, but essentially expanding the patio space against the building. Currently, I believe it's 6 feet. Expand that to 12 feet so the patios get more of a presence. We can bring that street life to the neighborhood and build on the existing trees, create more larger trees to create a continuous canopy, really lean into that character-defining idea that exists in these blocks already. And then where the paseos come out and intersect with State Street, that's where you see the little red square, a little small plaza-type space, which could be sort of a focus, a node of activity for street performers or other things to occur in the street. We'll go a little closer. Oh, and you do see, and we'll talk about this as well, at the end of the 400 block and Gutierrez, a key gateway element, and we'll talk in detail about what that could mean. Zooming in a little bit on the 500 block, just as a representative of the idea, you see the patio space. This isn't color-coded as much, but the sort of space next to that, the 8-foot walkway, and then the amenity space, and then the 20-foot corridor in the center with the plaza, what we're calling plaza room at the Paseo intersection. In very rough sketch form, this is what this could look like, the feeling of that space. You see on the left side, the pedestrian walkway, 8 feet wide, expanded patios, a large continuous canopy of trees. We think it could be fun to hang some lights or do some things, in there to really build that ambiance. And then you can sort of see the performance plaza in the center there with a couple maybe fun terrace seating. Those could be, I will say, I should have said this up front, you're going to see a lot of detailed ideas. The intent we're looking for today is this the right intent for that space? Is this the right character? Not, is that the right bench? But we need to, in order to convey the character and the activity we see, we need to sort of draw it at a certain level of detail. So if that's not the right bench, if we don't want people playing ping pong, that's fine. But we're just trying to communicate the concept. So you see some lighting, those terrace seatings, a sort of platform, all of that intended to create a stage for street performers and really amplify and support that activity in the district. I spoke a minute ago about the 400 block gateway. As you come in, coming up from under the new project from the Funk Zone and the beach on the bike lane or in your car, a new introduction to State Street at the 400 block. Again, the two sort of big pylon things, the gateway features that could have wayfinding information, interpretive exhibits, even a community posting board. There's a long list of things that could happen there, and the banners above it, maybe that's not the right idea, but the concept is a strong, defined gateway at the beginning, at the 400 block in Gutierrez there. And then and sort of extending that into the intersection with some enhanced paving and crosswalks. How does it work? This is a quick cross-section of State Street, of the 500 block. As I've said, you got 12 feet on either side for expanded patios, 8 feet for the sidewalk. You'll see on the right, it says 6 feet. That's a conversation where there are existing trees. If you really get into the details of the existing streetscapes, some areas are 24 feet wide, some are 18 feet wide. So it's a challenge to sort of fit the 12 feet and 6 and keep the existing trees. So that's a conversation. Maybe that should be 8 feet and the patio should be 10. And then you see 12 and 10 feet on either side for that sort of public activation, public amenity space, and the 20-foot corridor in the middle. One sort of what if we want to pose to everyone is, what if we rethink the patios? What if regulations and policies around patios change and we can move them out from the face of the building? Then in that case, you have the 10-foot wide walkway along the building, 20-foot wide consolidated patio space, or public amenity space. All of that would need to come with some very clear and good detailed guidance on how to create a patio and make it, improve the patio design. But we think that could, not only really reinforce and create a unique environment for the patios, but create more space for public activation too. That room that in the previous section was 12 feet wide now becomes 20 feet wide, and we can do more not only with the patios, but with public amenities and spaces. And with that, I'll hand it to Bill to go through the Civic District.
Hey everyone. So now you've seen the Old Town. It's a lot more of an, I'd say, a vibrant environment. As we get into the Civic District, we start to think about, okay, what can this be? And so as you saw in the district diagram, we started to talk about catalyzing. So for the Civic District, as we're calling it right now, the idea is to sort of showcase the best of Santa Barbara. And what we're trying to do here is really think about these key anchors, tying into De La Guerra, you've got City Hall, El Paseo, Paseo Nuevo, and thinking about how we can start to make broader connections beyond State Street in this location. Of course, as we start to think about housing, that plays into it. We start to think about how people are actually going to live in this space. This could be a space where you might get your morning coffee, you might people watch, you might meet your friends here, you might then go off into these other spaces. It's a space where you're going to see families, there's going to be play elements. Again, we talk about moments of joy. There could be local kiosks that help support small businesses. And then, again, thinking about performances and the opportunity for farmers markets and things like that. So as we start to look at this diagram, you can see a lot of these similar elements that Matt just pointed out. So you'll see now you've got this 8-foot continuous walkway along the retail fronts. And then we're starting to create these Paseo network rooms that start to pull out into State Street, right? So we're starting to think a little bit more about going across as opposed to just linear through State Street and really connect that network. A couple other things you'll notice too is we're starting to think about garden rooms as well. So these might be some of these transitional spaces, and again, as Ken and others have pointed out, this is a long stretch of road. And the idea is that we're not trying to program heavily this entire stretch of road. There's going to be moments, like you see with the Paseo rooms, and then you're going to have more garden rooms that might be a little bit more passive and quiet. But then they might also have elements for seating and things like that. You can see also in the diagram below that the way that space is used, that corridor can still work through there. And while the old town was much more linear, and we were thinking more about evenly distributing some of that public space on either side of that corridor, in this case, we're thinking about how that might meander through. So if you were standing down at the intersection, you might look through and start to see those garden rooms start to layer a bit, right? So it's not as much of a linear corridor in that respect. You'll also see we're suggesting gateways at the intersections here as well. So as Matt was saying, there might be a gateway at, say, the 400 block that might signify the entrance to the State Street Promenade. But there could be other secondary gateways that signify the changing between one district to the next, and that could be, a monument of some sort, or it could be just in some kind of common landscape treatment that we might do. So you can see this is just to start to give you a feel for what this space might be. You can see the pedestrian walkway now against the building. You've got a much better frontage if you have retail stores here. You're walking through that area. You might have these, you see this platform. That could be a stage. It could be seating. It's a flexible space. You see some pop jets and some kind of maybe water element that could be turned off if you wanted to have a performance or a gathering of some sort. So again, this might be a place that you can experience individually. It might be a spot where you go to, have your voice heard, right? Or to rally in support of a cause and maybe see a performance. And when we talk about moments of joy, we talk about play quite a bit. We're not always just talking about like a play structure or some very specific play element. It could just be sort of these whimsical elements that are placed throughout that invite play, right? And so that's maybe a point of discussion as well as what play might look like, but that starts to get into the details of the design. But you can start to see how these garden rooms might start to shape up and incorporate those play elements as well. So a lot more trees, a lot more landscape. And you can see here, so we are again thinking about how that corridor might meander a bit. Here you see the 6-foot patio space, you see an 8-foot sidewalk corridor, and then really this space kind of blends together. So even though you're seeing these colors overlap, in reality when you get out there, this might be paved in a way that it seems like a very connected space. You'll see the garden rooms. Some of these spaces could also be used for like bioretention and dealing with some of the stormwater issues. You'll see the platforms there as well, playful elements, playful seating, movable seating so that you can have agency over how you want to sit and talk to your friends and family. And then, the what if in this area is thinking again about this long-term vision. Is there a way to think more broadly about what this public space can be? So we're talking about some of these Paseo connections. Is there a potential for a larger public space that connects to some of these key anchors as well? It could be this big, paved area where larger performances happen, larger gatherings. It could be a lawn area, again, thinking about a place that could be used for play as well as gathering. Now we're going to go into the Arts District, the final one. I'm going to pass it back to Matt.
Thanks, Bill. So, as you said, the last district, the Arts District, and as I said before, this is another one of what we've sort of called amplified districts, a district that already has a lot of successful elements that we want to build on and amplify and create spaces that support that, and then sort of broaden the invitation. So the Arts District is already animated by, as you all know well, all of the destinations, the Art Museum, the Granada and Arlington theaters, the historic courthouse. You can see there the sort of potential design elements, and then a bit of these pictures of, of the types of spaces and activities and things that could occur in there. And one thing I want to emphasize is, if we line these all next to each other, you'd see play, for example, occurs in all of the districts. So, we want children and fun to happen in all of these districts, but maybe it happens slightly differently in the Art District than it does in the Old Town District or does in the Civic District. So you see playful art. Maybe it's fun sculptural elements that speak to, I'm in the Arts District, but still are exciting for kids to come play and climb on and sort of create that level of activity. So every district is still inviting everybody, but it's maybe doing it in slightly different ways. So back to our diagram, as usual. Again, the 8-foot pedestrian walkway along the edges, continuous. The 20-foot corridor, sort of as it does in the Civic District, meanders a bit, moves back and forth. We've heard a lot about wanting to create variety and sort of break down the long linear nature of the space, create some sort of shorter views and more enclosed rooms. And then you can see the Paseo network is strong in here. You see the dark blue activation space, and then the plazas. And in this case, where the Paseos come through, you see some smaller plazas, but the main plazas are really almost like front porches conceived of as for those key cultural destinations that sort of populate this district. So we've got one in the sort of foreground of the diagram here in front of the Museum of Art, another one in front of the Granada Theater, another one in front of the Arlington, and those could be, we know this district also has a unique need at times for drop-off, so it could function as drop-off, but also spill out for events and really sort of create, build on the nodes that are already there to create nodes of public space as well. Zooming in a little bit more, you see here, that big box is meant to be the Granada Theater, but it could be any of the theaters. So you see the large plaza space out in front of it, the 8-foot walkway, again, the 6-foot space along the buildings for patios, the 20-foot corridor sort of moving through, and then the garden rooms that Bill spoke to. And in this district, maybe the garden rooms create space for art exhibits or small art programming, or way up at the very top there, kind of behind a tree, so a little shaded in green, maybe the garden room is a piece of sculpture, like we talked about before, that kids can play on, that provides a little moment of joy, a point of emphasis there. And then the largest gesture of public space is the large plaza space, which could be, as I said, sort of a destination plaza, drop-off, events for the theater or the art museum or the library. A quick look at what that kind of plaza could be. This is in front of the art museum. I will say we took a little liberty and had some fun with the steps on the left. We have not talked to the art museum about that. I want to make that caveat clear, but we just couldn't resist the opportunity to use that grade change to create sort of social step overlooking this plaza. Perhaps one of these plazas wants to have a sort of a shade structure, which would create a venue with some protection where you could have smaller performances, art classes. The art museum could come out and actually have an exhibition under there that's really animating the public space as well. Or just an everyday shaded, comfortable meeting place, or a place that's lit well at night to meet your friends. Say, I'll meet you at the shade, out in front of the art museum. Again, like we've talked about, playful art installations, and then there's you can see the 20-foot corridor. Another what if, taking the concept a step further, the destinations, the institutions in this district are not only on State Street, they go up Anapamu to the library plaza and all the way up to the county courthouse. So what if we took this idea that we're diagramming and sort of sketching with State and went perpendicular to State and thought of this more of as a district, a neighborhood idea, and stretched up Anapamu with the same kind of idea. And you can see again the 20-foot corridor, the walkways, and the plaza spaces. And at the library plaza, that sort of extends out and starts to animate, and connect to on a Pamu Street. That's a question, we'll come back to it as questions, but that's an idea that doesn't just need to exist on Anapamu. We'd love to ask the committee, are there other streets that think make sense for that kind of idea stretching off of State Street in the long term? Another thing that we should have mentioned, but I will now, you see some red dashed lines on the cross streets. So it's been consistent in each of the diagrams, but I'll point it out now. What that is trying to denote is drop-off and loading occurring on perpendicular streets close to the intersection. So if you have a drop-off there, or we know some of these concepts will restrict some of the loading access, so we need to create space for that, create space for drop-off close to State Street. Looking a little bit more detail at, on the right-hand side of this, is you see State Street. On the left-hand side, you see Anapamu, and that corridor stretching up. We didn't put the trees in the Library Plaza just so you could see it, but stretching up Anapamu, connecting to the Library Plaza, or stretching down State Street, jogging a little bit to create different kinds of spaces on either side of the street and a little bit of variety. Again, sketch, this is Anapamu Street. The Library Plaza is on your left. There's some sort of big red and blue sort of beanbags. That's the, it's just saying a temporary art installation. That's what that's meant to represent. But, a nice pedestrian promenade on the right hand with the continuous pedestrian walk, some seating areas, increased tree canopy, and then again, you see the 20-foot corridor in the center. How this works, the cross section there, 8-foot walks on either side. You've seen, I think, consistently a lot of these concepts in the last two districts. Moving the 20-foot corridor to one side or the other of the right-of-way to create additional space on that side. So push it over, we get 6 feet on one side, that could include a tree. On the other side, we get 18 feet. By doing that, we create greater, more concentrated, sort of consolidated space that we can use to create amenities, the little garden rooms that we're speaking of. And that's it. And so.
Thanks, Matt. For the State Street Advisory Committee, I wanted to take this moment to open it up for clarifying questions. So just as a reminder, we're going to go questions, we'll do public comment, and then we'll come back and ask the committee for their comments and overall feedback. But if there are questions, we went through a lot in the 3 different districts. So if there are questions that you have on any of the concepts, we can go back and talk through them.
Yeah, in fact, I'm gonna go around the room and call on you, and if you don't have any questions this time, just say pass, and just go on. Okay, Marge, I'm gonna start with you. Microphone. Use your microphone. We have an audience.
Okay. One question is in slide number 14, areas of agreement. You state on that slide that Paseo Nuevo is a strategic long-term opportunity. I'm just curious what the strategic long-term opportunity is.
Yeah, thank you. I can answer that question. So Paseo Nuevo is one of the areas that we're looking at when we're thinking about housing redevelopment. And so recognizing that at some point in the future, there could be redevelopment on Paseo Nuevo, and that could include quite a number of housing units. And so I think it's important to be thinking about that space as a potential for that to occur, as well as a lot of the other areas that we mentioned, because it's such a large space and because it's right in the center. There are a few other of there we go. Some of the others as well. So you'll see across the street a couple of the surface parking lots, and then a number of those smaller dots that are emphasizing opportunity sites that the housing element is calling out for potential opportunity for development, and is anticipated that it could occur over the next 8 years. So I think this slide in particular, the point of this is really to show that there could be hundreds to thousands of new units of housing right in the project area on State Street and within a block in either direction.
Okay, Michael Becker.
Thank you, Chair. Just curious how curbs or no curbs play into what we just saw.
So I think if you looked at the schedule, there is a drainage conversation upcoming, so that needs to inform it. what this is sort of showing is more of a curbless solution, but that detail needs to be discussed, you know, with all of the options and ramifications of that at that upcoming meeting.
Another thing, just talking on the curb and curbless, when we get into the mobility discussion, that might influence some of that conversation as well.
Great, thank you. Mike Jordan.
Thank you. I got a whole sheet of questions here, so I'll just ask you a couple. I can't tell on that map if you are looking at and or considering the integration of private paseos that exist in the city with your public paseos. Maybe you had another map that had paseos on them. And also even whether you're looking at places that are de facto paseos. I'll just give you the example of the parking lot cut through behind the News Press building going over to Ortega Street. That's just a dumpy parking lot cut through that's acting like a paseo. And so are any thoughts on how that works into all this? You've shown the public paseos on it, but where are we capturing the existing private paseos and then building off of those, or looking for other opportunities to grab land where some of these private paseos are already functioning that way?
So I would say you're right. We've got the public paseos mapped, and they're reflected in this. The private paseos, I think, you know, what we're really looking for is the way we've integrated, or, you know, the ideas you see where a paseo connects, how that's creating an idea, a new space on State Street. You know, that's a concept, and we think that's a good concept to pursue. We could certainly apply it and look at it in relation to the public paseos, or the sort of, like you said, informal paseos where people are actually going but aren't mapped or recognized formally.
I tend to get down a little more in the weeds even, so it's like I'm always looking for public paseos that dead end somewhere, and if that building wasn't there across the street, that could be the next extension of that public paseo. So I'd like to see opinions on that, where those are, you know, where those are, and they're limited, and then you could you just put the ball in our court to go out and chase it or not.
And I would say this, on the private paseos, I think they're a good discussion point. Should they be sort of reflected in State Street or Rambla Pamu, you know, in this vision? The risk in that, right, is they're private. They could go away. They could change, right? So do we, you know, and if it changed and there's still a little small plaza space, that might not be consequential, but, you know.
I think I'm just going to jump in here to Mike. One other thing, I pulled up the Arts District here because I think it highlights a lot of the paseo network right within this 2-3 block space. If you look at the paseos in between 3 and 4, there's a pretty, Anna Pamu right in that space. There's an easy way to connect via, whether it's a crosswalk or otherwise, just drawing people from something as simple as that, as putting something on the road to get people to recognize that you can actually experience the entire space almost from Victoria down to Figueroa Street, going really through different paseos. And that's a whole separate area besides just State Street.
I'm off into comments, so I'll save that for a comment later. So, and then housing was mentioned 27 times on the first page probably, but I haven't really seen you, other than housing, talk about in these zone configurations, where you would recommend, or where you've seen successful housing integrated into that. Would that be in the lower zone, the middle zone, or the upper zone? And then what are the considerations when you're designing the streetscape for looking to incentivize or promote housing to be built where you want it to be built? When does that take part in this?
So that question, how does the streetscape create spaces that support people living, support a neighborhood, we hoped was a little bit embedded here. You know, some of this is a little, I'll say, diagrammatic, but, you know, as in the Civic District, as Bill said, there's play spaces. You're seeing a lot of different garden room type spaces, informal, small gathering spaces, larger, you know, slightly larger performance spaces. So a whole range of different spaces. Some of those, you know, we would hope would support coming out of your apartment and reading a book, or walking, you know, with your kids, or bringing your kids downstairs to, you know, play. You know, so we hope those spaces also are supportive of a neighborhood as well as the districts.
So I
If
guess
that's not coming through,
So I
that's
guess I'd
something
be
we need to
looking
work
for
on.
some editorial content there, because sometimes not. When I was younger, and you'd had the kids, I'd go stay at Disneyland right over whatever the active side of the park is there, and maybe now when I'm older, that's not really the part I want to stay over. So I guess I'm looking hopefully for some examples of what that looks like tangibly for when you're trying to make decisions on how to leverage or how to incentivize.
For the second part
sorry,
to
Tess, go ahead.
to the question on incentivizing housing, that'll be something that we're really going to talk through during the most likely in the November and December meetings, is in that policy and implementation
Forgot
discussion.
the mobility lecture at the start, didn't I, already? Huh. And then you've been really quiet on the center corridor, so I'm assuming that center corridor is up for discussion on programming either for bicycles or vehicles, and we're going to discuss that when.
So, Mike, just to make sure I'm clear, when you say center corridor, you're meaning that civic district that we walked through?
The thing that every exhibit I saw did not have a
The
vehicle
20
on
feet.
it and did
That's
not have
right.
a car
So
or
yes,
a
so
bike
that
on it.
the point of the 20-foot corridor throughout all three of the districts is not to show that it's a 10-block pedestrian promenade necessarily. That's potentially an option, right? But it could have cars. There could be one-way or two-way vehicle traffic. It could have shuttles. It could have bike facilities in any of these, in any of the three districts. Really, the point right now is that rather than have the mobility drive what activities can exist in this space, we want to get straight what kinds of activities we're hoping to see in each district, and then help that guide what mobility might make more sense in certain areas.
Okay, I'm not sure which one's the chicken and which one's the egg, but we'll see how that works. Thank you.
All right, jump over. Kristen Snedden.
Thank you. It's like popcorn. We don't know when we're going to be. I have some similar questions to follow up on. One for the identified housing potential areas. Does that include adaptive reuse? If we're working on this adaptive reuse ordinance and really hoping to sort of reuse a lot of those spaces, is that included in there?
That's a great question, Kristen. Adaptive reuse is not highlighted in the housing slide that I showed, but it's another piece to the puzzle, right? So it could mean that there are more buildings that come online for housing purposes than what that map showed.
And is it concentrated in any one particular area, or do we just sort of assume it's sprinkled throughout that there might be adaptive reuse?
My understanding is that it could be spread out. Really, that policy will help drive where different buildings can potentially use adaptive reuse.
If I could jump in, Councilmember Seddon, I think the ordinance would apply to the entire district. The buildings that are best suited for adaptive reuse for housing are really come down to a almost building by building level of analysis. And so it's hard to say this one is an adaptive reuse and this one isn't. But the ordinance which you're referring to would apply to the entire district.
And it would just increase our number of housing potential here. Okay.
That's correct.
Thank you. And then in all of these, and this is a follow-up to Councilmember Jordan's question, the 20-foot lane goes in the middle and the pedestrian lanes are still split apart from each other. And Mr. Lundbeck last time mentioned a really interesting idea of pushing up on one side all of the pedestrian and another side maybe a different lane. And forgive me, Mr. Lundbeck, if I'm taking liberties with that, but I thought it was really interesting. So this shows the 20 feet always in the middle, either meandering or straight, with pedestrian on either side split. And I think we've had a lot of discussion about how pedestrian space is sort of nice when it's concentrated together. Is that something that's still?
So I think I would say there's a couple, let me give a little more detail on both of those. As Tessa said, the 20-foot corridor, we've left it open. We're going to have the mobility discussion. It is also the fire lane in this diagram. So the fire lane, in order to work for emergency access, you need to be able to access both buildings, either side of the street. So it probably wouldn't work from an emergency services standpoint to push that 20-foot corridor all the way against one of the buildings. We've also got existing trees, several of which are worth preserving, The 8-foot corridor doesn't mean to suggest that that's the only place where pedestrians are welcome to stroll and walk. It is just the basically continuous clear zone that every block will have, so that there is, the patio spaces, even though they look like they inch into on this drawing, that will be clear. The area to the right of that could also be totally welcome for pedestrians to walk in. To the left of it, they could cross the 20-foot corridor, but that 8-foot corridor relates to maintaining ADA, accessible access, your accessible route. It connects to things at intersections. So we need to keep that so that everybody has a understandable, legible, safe place to walk.
Thank you, and I appreciate that it's not being programmed yet, so I do appreciate that. So this is a good example. In this, is it still possible that one side of that is just pedestrian and one side of that is bicycles, say? Or are we really limiting where bicycles might go to the middle?
I'll jump into that. Matt, do you have the clicker by chance? I'm going to grab that real quick. So one of the things I wanted to highlight just from the question earlier, let's see if I can get this, there we go. So this space here, you're seeing, Matt was talking about this 8-foot pedestrian corridor. That's the continual sidewalk space. That generally would be straight so that you have a continuous path of travel. But this space here, it fluctuates. So in this area, you're seeing that this curve happens up here and it dips back. So this is closer to 20 feet from the edge of the fire lane to the building frontage. This space here is closer to 40 feet. So you have that different, quite a variation in terms of the actual pedestrian space. This is the space that we're going to talk about in terms of transportation. So we will talk about whether this has bikes or cars or shuttles. This here is showing you really the flip of what this side is showing. So this is showing you a smaller space. This is closer to 20 feet when you add it up, and then it extends outward. Now the spacing could be different. We can play with that a little bit. Part of the modeling was looking at what types of what are the existing uses in the space. We recognize that most likely a restaurant space, it could change to something else, but a lot of times a restaurant will convert into another restaurant. And so recognizing some of the seating options in different locations there for that purpose. So hopefully that gets at it a little bit. You'll see sort of a difference as in the Old Town area. You'll see really a straight pathway, and I might have a slide come up in a minute, but the idea there is that you have equal space generally on either side of the street. So recognizing that in the Old Town you have quite a bit of restaurant dining area. I think at one point about 20 different outdoor dining seating areas just on one of those blocks. And so creating an equal space. This is showing a more meander version. That's also the case in the Civic District.
Thank you. And then
sorry. Can I add one more thing? Sure. You mentioned could we have a bike lane or something pushed all the way to one side? A couple other just sort of background technical things about that yellow line. It needs to occur on both sides of the street, or more literally, we need to provide access for all to every storefront. Right, so there's some logic to having a corridor close to those buildings on either side of the street. If you push the yellow all the way to one side, then we'd have to draw a yellow line perpendicular to every storefront.
Got it.
And really start to affect how we use the space.
So it's at least 8 feet of pedestrian on either side, and then we can play with the
and
middle.
then
Okay.
the bright green ones are existing trees. So there is a little bit of a legacy of this being a street as it converts into a more diverse type of space.
Thank you. And then another quick question about the trees, and then one other question. But on the 500 block, some of those trees could come right out to the 20-foot corridor line if we're adding to the canopy. Okay.
Yep.
And then just one last question. You had a water feature, and without going into details, it's in the Civic area, and we're talking about a water feature in De La Guerra Plaza, which I don't want to get into, except for that. How would those tie in, and are we looking at how we're looking at programming De La Guerra Plaza and Library Plaza specifically? You did a great job showing that, but also with De La Guerra Plaza, when we talk about the Civic District, how that might tie in with duplicative programming.
I can jump in on that one. You're right, Kristen. So in this slide right here, you are seeing a water feature, and De La Guerra Plaza also has a water feature. So this may not make sense in this space. It could be that a water component, that they might be different enough where something could make sense over here, or that maybe it makes more sense in the State Street corridor. We're not necessarily trying to say that that's what has to happen in this Civic Center, but what we are trying to say is from this standpoint, a water feature is providing sort of an area for play, and then it's also creating a defining space. So that could be a number of different things, but having some central location where you are somewhere you can meet up, somewhere you can hang out, or your kids can play in. That's the idea for that space. The other thing, just highlighting, because you mentioned De La Guerra Plaza, so so this one here is talking about really creating an extended space. This is a bigger, bolder move that would extend probably beyond a lot of what we're talking about in terms of the master plan for State Street. But the idea here is, what if you created this larger space that essentially connects De La Guerra Plaza with State Street? And it doesn't have to be De La Guerra Plaza. We're saying a large community space in the Civic District, so it could also be an area by De La Guerra Street where you're connecting a portion of Paseo Nuevo to State Street. But that idea that you push out the street so it becomes less of a linear move.
Okay. Next, Suzanne Tejada. Suzanne?
I don't have anything to add at this
Great,
point.
good. We will go then to Kristen Miller.
Great, thank you. This is so nice and interesting, and I thank you for it. I'm particularly interested in the districts and the discussion about that. I guess my question is, how do I ask this? Are there more distinct designs or activities or suggested structures that more closely relate to each of the themes? So if in Old Town, I know you talked about there being, in each district, there being signage or a gateway or something that's different, but I could be that I missed it, but I didn't see a lot of distinction between the three districts in sort of the design that's being proposed. For instance, if one of the areas might be designed to attract a certain audience because it's the art district, and similarly with Old Town, then wouldn't the amenities that we put there or the way we design it also be a little more different than what I saw here, unless, again, I missed it. And then along with that, I wonder if that speaks to a potential leasing strategy or way that those districts then relate to the businesses that are currently in those areas or blocks, or that might be in the future. So that if we're, again, really defining each of these districts a little more distinctly than it seems like what I just saw. And I do have one more follow-up question if you want to answer that one first.
Tess, can you go to the diagram of the art district, say?
Sure.
Either that or the Civic, either one. So we did try actually to sort of show some of that differentiation in some of the things in the different plaza spaces and otherwise. So in the art district, the sort of garden rooms, some of them were programmed and had sculpture or small spaces for performance, and some of them are flexible so that, when you look at them without programming them, they're going to look pretty similar. Yeah. But they had, if you look up at the very top in the back there, the garden room with play structure, that label, yeah, thanks. I didn't know that had a thing. The idea there is that we're using art, we're using sculpture to create a moment of joy, a place for play, right, and gathering. Whereas if you look at it in the Civic District, it's the sort of colorful mounds, which the idea actually was those could be like a recreation of the Channel Islands, and kids could run around and play on them, something unique to Santa Barbara, but a bit more playful, a bit, so a little bit a different way of achieving some of the same activities and goals. The other thing, if you look really close, that we didn't point out is the furnishings change, each one. In the Civic District and in the Old Town, you see some of the sketches show Adirondack chairs and more social seating. In the arts district, it shows more like bistro chairs and other things. So we are thinking about how you differentiate it. What isn't at this level of design sort of illustrated and shown is how could the paving be different? How could other details and things? And that's because at this point, we're deliberately keeping it a little bit diagrammatic because we want to talk about the space. You know, those details will come over time.
Okay, and I appreciate too that you may want that feedback from this group. That if
That'll be a
we-
question at some
that
point,
if
should they-
tonight
yeah.
we agree that we like the districts and that each of them seem to have some of the similar elements of a play, some kind of a stage and some outdoor seating, but then how are those different in each one?
Right.
I think I'm just going to add one more thing to that comment or that response. One of the things that the districts do differently is shift the actual path. So as a pedestrian or otherwise, you're in Old Town, you've got more of a linear configuration. In the civic district or the core, you have a number of different plaza spaces. So that's really emphasizing this community gathering space right in the heart, right in the center. And then up in the arts district, you have a more meandering pathway. So you're getting bigger spaces and smaller spaces depending on where you go up.
Great, thank you. And then my follow-up just has to do with the 20-foot lane that we're going to talk about what happens in there more at the next meeting. But for this phase, is there a point in the future you can give us a list, or should we debate some? Are there activities and amenities that could be in that space in some of the blocks where it's appropriate that can come down? In other words, that they're temporary enough that if that lane is not being, in that block, it's not being used as a constant lane, it just has to be there for emergencies. So like the water feature that you showed, I thought, well, that's perfect, because then you just turn the water off and if you have to drive over there. But I bet there are other things that your expertise might recommend.
So I would defer that, you're going to hear this a lot, right, to that conversation in October. Yes, depending on the mobility concept that supports the activation, certainly things can move in and out. You know, all of those are a 20-foot fire lane, so you have to be able to move it. You know, if there's an emergency, the fire truck needs to get into it. So that's a restriction that will exist in all of these in any mobility concept. But conceptually, depending on the mobility options, yes, and you're exactly right. We like the water feature idea because if you want to have a big festival there, you shut it off and it's a plaza. If the fire truck needs to go through there, you shut it off, or the fire truck gets a bath, right? It's pretty adaptable, and adaptability is a concept we've talked in previous meetings about. That still is a principle that we want to keep discussing in the future meetings.
Yeah, I just want to emphasize the last point Matt made. Through this conversation, we don't want to lose sight of this idea of flexibility and adaptability of the street. So all of these concepts, that's still a sort of an underlying value and principle in any design recommendations for any of the three districts, is that ability to be flexible and adaptable depending on time of day, day of week, week of the year, that sort of thing.
Good, thank you. We will then go to Peter Lewis. I think Peter's online.
Good evening, everybody. I have one question, is the 8-foot sidewalks, where did that dimension come from?
The question is, where did the 8-foot sidewalk dimension came from? I believe it came from the landscape guidelines that are already published.
That's
Okay,
right. We have guidelines on sidewalk widths. So there is a requirement for accessibility, and then and 8 feet is the standard in the city.
The second question is the heritage trees. I assume the MIG is working off of existing surveys of all the street trees in the project area. And are the heritage trees depicted as the light green?
Yes, they are. They're the sort of brighter green in this slide that's showing now on the far right. And I've called them heritage trees. We are working off of the GIS database information provided by the city. So they're labeled as large trees in that.
And just, I'm going to have Jessica Grant come on up and just make, if there's any clarification for the question on the 8-foot pedestrian space. Thanks, Jessica.
Yes. Hi. Let me know when that's okay. Touch it, yeah, okay. So the 8 foot is part of.
No.
Yes, where the 8-foot sidewalk, it's from the pedestrian master plan, and that is the defining part for the through zone currently for this size right-of-way. Besides the 8 foot, there's more in the sidewalk dimension, but that's what we consider the functional sidewalk as it's defined today. In the future meeting, when we dive into the transportation comments and issues, we'll be discussing what the various cross-sections mean.
Okay. Next is Ed Lindvik.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I have a number of questions, and I don't want them to flow over into comments, so I want you to be careful with me, okay? Thank you. I have a basic question of the original design parameters. Why are we going to Sola Street, number one? And I was under the impression that the 400 block of State Street needed to be two-way traffic for fire safety, for life safety. And yet we seem to have included, I won't call it a wasted block between Victoria and Sola, but we seem to have included that, and we've included the 400 and 300 block in this planning, and I don't know why that is.
Sure, I can answer that comment. So when City Council decided to form the committee and to move forward with a State Street Master Plan, this was the configuration. So the idea was from the 101 undercrossing up to Sola Street. I think part of the recognition is that the 1300 block contains other historic structures, such as the Arlington Theater. And then going down to the 300 block is currently really connects to the undercrossing project that's underway. So the emphasis that MIG and that the city is looking at is from the 400 up to the 1300, but recognizing that the 300 block needs to connect because we need to be getting people from the funk zone and the waterfront up and down.
So it wasn't feedback from MIG, it was you directing him to go that far.
City Council created the boundary at the onset of this project.
Well, they created a boundary which was pandemic related, if I recall.
So at the March 2021, City Council decided to move forward with a State Street Master Plan. At that time, they had initiated the search for the State Street Advisory Committee members, and then my position was created, and a decision was made to move forward with this longer term plan. There certainly is a connection to the short and long term, but they are different.
Okay. One other question. Have you investigated what the minimum width for a parade would be?
Could you repeat that? The minimum width for
a
for
parade?
grade? A parade.
Parade,
Okay.
fiesta, solstice, whatever. More than 20 feet, but how much more?
That's a good question. I think we'll have to come back to you with
It's a good
from
question.
a couple different departments,
It's
from
a good
public
question.
safety
and
and
I
others.
assume that service to these restaurants and retail establishments, so on and so forth, will be discussed in the mobility section of our meeting in several weeks.
Ed, do you mean service like
Getting
delivery
hamburgers
service?
and French fries in their raw form to the restaurant.
Yeah, so that will be discussed. That the deliveries will need to happen on the street regardless of the of how we decide to configure
Okay.
it. So we will need to talk about what the timing of that is, and how that will really play out. That'll happen in the mobility discussions, but that is part of the project.
And I'll just add, excuse me, if you can go to any one of the diagrams, right, all of the little aerial diagrams had the dashed line on cross streets. So one thing that we've said as a service concept here is that those cross streets in any of these, depending on exactly, what the mobility conversation leads to, those cross streets do have more of a responsibility to handle some of that loading. We need to reserve space close to the intersection for drop-off and loading.
Yeah, that happens now, and I must thank the city police department for not ticketing all of the trucks, cars, and vendors that are parked in the red zones and green zones and yellow zones on the side streets adjoining State Street now.
Okay, thank you, Ed. Robin Nylander.
Yes, I had a couple questions. In one of your slides, you shared that there was an outdoor seating area, and I wasn't sure if you were exploring the concept of shared outdoor dining with multiple businesses using that. So I wanted to see if you could address that. And then also, in terms of these civic areas, particularly on Gutierrez Street, is that area has... It looks like there's cars, but then it also looks like there's a plaza in the middle where there's cars. So I'm a little confused as if you can further share what is going on in that space there.
So we could use this one or the diagram. So first, I feel like a broken record. We don't know if there's cars yet in there, right? We have the mobility corridor, but you're right. Some of those little red squares that say plaza sort of span over that corridor. So potentially, depending on the mobility concept, that would affect how that plaza is used. That's why we want to have an in-depth conversation over what is the role of that plaza, how does it relate to the activation public life of the district, and what are the mobility options that are potential and the impact of those options. And that requires a pretty deep dive, and there's trade-offs and options that we'll talk about. So you're really getting to a good question for the next thing. How do those red squares work if we have cars in that space, or if we don't have cars in that space, or if we have bikes, right? That's the connection between the public life and the activation that we're trying to sort of communicate here, and the decisions we make in the future about the mobility concept, right? Your first question, I skipped over, I think, your first question. I apologize.
Regarding shared outdoor dining.
I can't talk anymore.
Shared outdoor dining, yeah. So let's go to, can you go to the Arts District one? I think that shows it the best. So we are illustrating in here a few different versions of outdoor dining, and it's a good continuing sort of operational discussion. The tables on the edges in that 6-foot zone basically they're symbolized with the umbrellas. Those are meant to represent a restaurant patio that's serviced. Probably would have a fence, or some kind of containment, right, definition to it. It's controlled. The little group of tables that are in the plaza, for example, or those could occur in any of these garden rooms or things, could be shared outdoor dining for a restaurant. I'm going to just use an ice cream shop, right, or something that isn't having serviced, and you grab your ice cream or your burrito or whatever it is and go sit in shared public seating out in the public realm. And there's a number of ways we could organize that type of seating, right, into groups, into smaller groups. It's sort of, I think we'd want to, as you continue to evolve that, we use the word posture, but what is the sort of attitude of the people doing it? Are they meeting a friend for a quick coffee and then going, or are they sitting down for an hour to have lunch? They want to be social. They not want to be social. That might shape sort of a different set of rooms of public dining furniture in different arrangements that might want to be deployed flexibly around the whole street. But those are, at this point, what we're trying to illustrate is two basic types: restaurant seating and public shared seating.
Got it. Thank you so much. And then the last question is, in each of these different districts, you didn't show any signage as it relates to the actual name. Of course, it's still an early concept. Would you envision some sense of arrival signage so people know specifically that they have arrived in the Arts District besides the design elements?
That is definitely an option, right? And there's a number of ways. We haven't got really into signage at all, honestly, but an element that might want to be in this, eventual master plan is, that signage, there's the community posting board, come see our concert, but also wayfinding. Here's where you are, here are other things in the community. That could happen every block, at the gateway to each district, right? I think that's a good conversation to have. It's a level of detail we haven't gotten to yet, but I think it's important.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Robin. Roger Durling. Microphone.
I can try to project, but I'm so jet-lagged, I hope I sound coherent. There was a lot of talk about moments of joy and entertainment and food, and I'm just curious if there has been discussions and thoughts about incorporating education, history, heritage, making this specific about Santa Barbara and who we are.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Roger. And the short answer to that is yes. I think we're showing a number of different elements here. You could be walking down on State Street and be experiencing a historical walk where you've got different elements that are identifying different features of either the architecture or the buildings that are adjacent to it or otherwise. I think from the education standpoint, there could be performance spaces, there can be art spaces, you can pull out classes in the outdoor areas underneath some of the awnings that we've identified or in a more public plaza space. So the idea is those spaces are flexible enough so that, I'll take the arts district as an example, you could have an exhibition with a sculpture painter, you could have a kid's art class for a month showcase their art. You could have people out there doing classes in the middle of the street. Those are all different options, and there's tons more there.
I agree. Yeah, I mean, it is something we've talked about. I think it's a level of detail, each one of these plaza rooms that are showing up on the diagrams, right? Like, those could be all kinds of interesting, just from a paving standpoint. Each one of those could tell a story about that block. There's good guidance in the EPV guidelines about paving patterns and things that make it, consistent with the character of Santa Barbara, which would need to be and want to be applied to that. But that layer plus an interpretive layer, or other things in the paving or signage, I think that all of those layers want to and need to come into this, but at this point, as Tess said, we're at the very basics of, are these the type of spaces that provide the opportunities for the programming, the activation, the life we want to see here? There's a lot of opportunity to bring all of that detail and really make it unique. We tried to express a little of that with Channel Islands playgrounds, right? But that's, there's a lot more opportunity than just that playground idea.
Okay, we'll next go to Hillary Blackerby.
No questions, thanks.
Okay, thank you. Diane Black.
I too had questions about housing, and I guess what I heard was we're going to talk about it probably in November, December timeframe. I want to make sure we don't miss the opportunity to comment on the adaptive reuse ordinance, and I don't know when that's moving forward, but I think it's really, really important for this committee to review and provide input on, especially people like Peter Lewis, who have made comments about what doesn't work right now in using buildings for housing. So I'm hoping we'll have an opportunity to do that, and would ask when that's going to move forward. And then I have another comment as well.
Okay, thank you.
Wait. I'm asking for
I'm sorry.
an
Go
answer,
ahead,
and then
Diane.
I have another
Go ahead.
question.
Well, I think that's beyond basically clarifying question today. That's a process question in that regard.
Okay, well, one of the slides was on our next meeting, so, okay.
Yeah. I mean, Diane, I appreciate the question. I don't, off the top of my head, know what the timing is of the adaptive reuse ordinance. I believe Tess referenced the meetings later this year about policy and implementation. That's as much about policy identification as it is actually drafting the policies themselves. And so that is being worked on currently by our planning division, but I don't know if the timing of that syncs up with the timing of this project.
Okay. And then I had a question. I don't remember which districts you had kiosks in. but maybe it was in the core or the civic district?
We showed and sort of proposed more in the core and civic district. I would say, a kiosk could exist in any of the districts. We, because there are fewer restaurants and wanting to sort of create an opportunity for incubating Santa Barbara businesses in the core, we sort of showing and sort of proposing more of a concentration in that district. But there could definitely be a great kiosk selling something, related to the arts district up in the arts district. Or, we probably wouldn't want as many food kiosks down in the old town, but there could be other things that, to complement the activity, the public life that we're wanting to see in each district. So I think it could happen in any of them.
And any consideration of food trucks?
We have not, expressly, deliberately talked about food trucks. I think it's a conversation worth having. I know what I think.
Good. Thank you, Diane. Megan? No questions? Ken? No questions? I have no questions. Okay. That takes us, we'll close this particular portion. We will then move to public comment. Tess, I will look to you to call public comment and to proceed with the process. Go ahead.
Great. Thank you, Chair Davis. Before I get into public comment for this item, I did want to read into the record the members of the public that submitted general public comment prior to the hearing. If public comment was submitted after this morning, I may not have the names of those individuals, but they will be distributed to the committee following the meeting. Those that I have general public comment received from are Sullivan Israel, Dave Amos, Luca de Ugruma, Kate Wynn Rogers, Ed Lenvik, Crystal Chan, Michael Schmidt, Janet Green, Charles Kaiser, Dave Green, Maria Black, Massimo Civillini, Richard Clausen, Christopher DeRose, Fred Sweeney, Diana La Riva, Kira Push, Bill Prothero, Harrison Hale, Jen Knaus, Michael Riley, Mike Llewellyn, Vanessa Rencher, John Kelly, Sunita Beal, Heather Deutsch, Dennis Thompson, Michael Giannino, Aaron Ashland, Sari Bryson, Micah Howard, Creed Bauman, Amanda Kennedy, Aaron Ashland, Anna, Caitlin Sherwood, Abby Carter, Juliana Moore, Bo Bowman, Katie, Grace Burgess, Tom Losner, John D. Kelly, D.H., Kango Chion, Lisa Blake, Sullivan Israel, Helena Davila, and Pamela Jameson Bohr. Okay, I'll now go into members of the public that wish to speak following the item that we just heard. If you do wish to speak and you haven't submitted a speaker slip, if you could please bring it up to me. I'm going to call out the first two. So we'll start with Lisa Knox Burns, followed by Marilyn Loper Fido.
Hello, all. I am Lisa Knox Burns. I spent most of my life on the corner of Anapamu and Anacapa in offices, and I am kind of getting wistful when I see the people standing on the streets, and I'm wondering, where are all the people going to be? How did they get here? So now I know it's housing. We're going to build housing, and then they're going to have all these great amenities. So maybe we're a little cart before the horse here, and maybe I should be talking to the State Street Pilot Program people. But at this point, I'm thinking we can use what we have today to activate state. And Mr. Lenvik, I think we should bring back parades. We have 20 feet, we have some room. I think we can get a parade in there. We could get a Christmas parade. We could get a solstice parade. I think we could get a fiesta parade. I think we can get a protest, that we used to have at the courthouse and move them down to De La Guerra. Those were all celebratory things that unified the space. So when I think of the people standing and waving from the courthouse, or should I say the Museum of Art, as shown in the slides, I think of parades. So please bring them back. Thank you.
Next, we have Marilyn Loper Fido, followed by Robert Elsey.
Hello, everybody. Is this on? This is on, right? Good. Because I can't read my notes. My name is Marilyn Loper Fido. I am a 43-year member of the Santa Barbara Arts and Crafts Show. And my concern today is that what's happening is our show is really become isolated from the whole corridor of State Street. And I think of us as an unintended consequence of what happened during the pandemic. But we've lost attendance between at least 50%. Business is down. We've got 140 families and businesses to support. So the reason I'm speaking today is that a couple of things. We need transportation to the show and not away from. And I've been following, I've attended the charrettes, I've done my questionnaires. Didn't occur to me to send a letter in today. So I am asking that we keep our show, even though we're not in the corridor, in the discussions and not just blend us into the funk zone. Because we actually don't have people even coming from the funk zone. It's so isolated now. So we need transportation, we need signage, we need some sort of involvement in the kiosks or whatever we design on State Streets to encourage people to come down to us, because now they no longer have a way to come down State Street and then come down to the beach. And you may just want to keep that discussion of the beach area in your discussions of the corridor and how you're going to unite those areas. So please keep us in the discussions. We really need a shuttle back. And then just as a citizen, I'm concerned, where is everyone going to park who's coming down, and where's the money coming from? So those are my questions. Thank you.
Next, we have Robert Elsey, followed by Molly Pearson.
Hello, my name is Robert Else. Elsey's close enough. I've lived here for 46 years. I love it here. The point I want to make is one that was pointed out to me by a friend of mine, that in front of the Granada, where during concert seasons, the symphony concerts and ballet and so on are heavily attended by seniors, people that move more slowly. I think being dropped off at the intersection is an impediment to that population. And you did mention drop-off, but then it looked like a plaza, and you mentioned plaza. So I just want to throw out that I think it's necessary, or conducive at least, to increasing attendance by seniors if they can get dropped off and picked up right in front of the Granada. I'm in favor of parades on State Street. I'm in favor of the shuttle on State Street. And I just want to draw your attention also to, quickly, to an article I read just this morning called "The Perils of State Street." And it's decrying the fast-moving wheeled vehicles and the collisions with pedestrians and exhorting the city to do something about it. Now, we all think bicycles and pedestrians in our present environment, but this article was dated May 1894. It's from the Santa Barbara Morning Press, and I have to thank Dave Davis for turning me on to this book about, it's a collection of Santa Barbara headlines from the newspapers, 1865 to 1960, something like that. It's a great book to give you perspective on wheeled vehicles and pedestrians and other things about our great city. Thanks.
Next, we have Molly Pearson, followed by Chris Benedict.
Yeah, thanks. I'm Molly Pearson, a resident, and I guess I just want to thank you for finally bringing that mobility discussion. I've been ringing that bell for many, many months. I've been participating and asking, where's transportation staff? Why aren't we hearing from them? So thank you for doing that. I think I've heard some comments about it's not necessarily a 10-block pedestrian promenade, but yet this staff report calls it a grand paseo and a promenade, and it almost sounds like we're not considering this is a vital transportation corridor for bicycles. If we're not committing to bicycles on State Street, are we going to make them safe on some other street? Because we not only ride down State Street, we spend money on State Street, we go to restaurants, we go to work, we go to fitness things, we go down to the beach, and how are we going to safely travel through town if it's not going to be on State Street? So thank you very much for that. A couple other things. economic vitality seems like it's not really being addressed. It's more like, public use of this space. And how are we going to support all this new public space that we're creating? Can we really support all the businesses we already have that offer these things, as well as creating all this new public space? It's pipe dreams right now. I'm a pragmatist. And the other thing I saw mentioned in the staff report is a large-scale community event space in the Civic Center. I haven't seen any discussion on that. Is that really needed? Who's the project proponent for that? Who's going to manage it? Where's the infrastructure for that? So I think that needs to be clarified a little more. So I think I'm almost in my 2 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. We have Chris Benedict, followed by Richard Yates. Okay, next we have Richard Yates, followed by Steve Saraboff.
Hello, everybody. Richard Yates from Opal Restaurant and Bar. I have nothing controversial to say today. I just wanted to congratulate the SACC for this presentation. And I want to point out something that you may not be aware of. Both the city and the advisory committee, I think, are aware that a number of us in our area, in the Arts District, banded together a year and a half ago to create an official organization, the Arts District of Santa Barbara, which more or less corresponds to the district that you've outlined here. And I want to bring attention to the public that this exists, and our goal is to promote all the businesses and organizations in our area. And also to mention that the idea of neighborhoods, I think, is key to revitalizing State Street. The Funk Zone kind of led the way for all of us to know what that could create. And in our area, we also have the Arts District, which was an already existing area with existing values. And I think that having all of State Street as a series of neighborhoods will create the sort of thriving revitalization that we've all been looking for. So I'd like to see that continue in your planning. The one thing I would mention about the boundaries is I didn't see on the maps the side streets. I think one block east and west in the Arts District, where there's a lot of other businesses and art galleries that could be part of it, I think that should somehow be included in this as well. And with that, I will just say that we really look forward to working with the SAAC to accomplish the same goals, to promote and help the town to become more of what it can be as we create this new vision for State Street. Thanks very much.
Thank you. We next have Steve Saraboff, followed by Valerie Green. Steve? Okay. So we'll move forward to Valerie Green, followed by Melville Sehun.
Hi, I just wanted to clarify a couple of things, and I understand the mobility isn't being really talked about yet, so maybe that's why we didn't see any bikes in hardly any of the slides. But I really feel it's necessary as a form of public transportation now with all the e-bikes, that we have a safe way for them to be implemented into the plan. And also, I was just concerned about the look of everything, and I know it's very preliminary, but all the straight lines, it just looked very Thousand Oaks. I hope we can incorporate Santa Barbara style. We have an opportunity like we did after the earthquake, where we can just come in and make something really beautiful that reflects our city. So please keep that in mind too. Thanks.
Thank you. We have Melville Sehun, followed by Michael Charlesberg.
Good afternoon. I like the idea of really considering the promenade in terms of 3 separate districts, each with their own character, and I think this is great progress from what I saw at the May meeting, so well done on that. I would suggest that in implementing them, that we probably do not want to try to implement all 3 districts simultaneously. That gives us a better opportunity to learn as we go. The other thing that concerns me a little bit are the proposals for using parking lot space as sites for housing. Because I think if these promenade districts are successful, they're going to bring people downtown. And the majority of those people are going to come with cars, and they will need parking within convenient distances from the promenades. So I think that any proposal that would reduce the amount of parking available in downtown might be self-defeating. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Mike Charlesberg, followed by Ian Bauke. Apologies if I mispronounced.
The name's Schaumburg. Easy. Good afternoon. I really, really like the idea that the parklets are moving in towards the buildings and away from the street. I hope that the restaurateurs are saving their money so that they can remodel, because it's going to cost them a lot of money to do that, but I think it really, really adds to the city. Second thing, the offset streets, the meandering, I think it's called. In New Zealand, there's a town, if you want to write it down, Napier. It's about the same size as Santa Barbara. It already has these meandering streets, and it's lovely. It breaks up that linear look, and it can allow for buildings that are a little offset here and there, where you can put something over here and nothing over here. The street goes that way. It's very delightful. It's called Emerson Street, by the way. You can Google it, and it's a great street. You can look on Google Maps. It's fabulous. Already done, guys. You don't have to invent it. I also appreciate the fact that in all of these drawings, I did not see one bicycle. Thank you for your time.
Next up, we have Ian Bauke, followed by Ann Peterson.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ian Bauke, born and raised in the city of Santa Barbara, and I just want to start off by expressing my gratitude to you all. I know you're all signing up to get an earful and talk about really difficult stuff, and you don't always get the thanks that you deserve, and I know there's a lot of work that goes on outside of the public realm. So just want to say that, and how excited I am to see Santa Barbara really taking this, I mean, honestly, radical move to go forward and create this kind of space and envision our downtown in this kind of way. It's not something that a lot of communities in this country do, and I'm really proud to be from Santa Barbara, a community that's working on this. Part of that, though, I think that's really important to emphasize is not just creating a downtown mall for consumers, but really a downtown neighborhood, like folks were saying, for residents, for people to go, and not necessarily just spend money and patronize businesses. I love doing that myself, but going beyond that and placemaking for human-scaled experiences. Part of that, this is a master planning effort, right? And one of those elements is housing. I really think it's essential that, honestly, you have a meeting just about those housing policies and planning, because in my opinion, and I'm sure some folks would disagree, there's a lot of things that need to be recommended to City Council as items in this master plan document. The densities do need to increase. In my opinion, the inclusionary housing requirements also need to increase along with that to get that value capture, so you're not just handing extra land value to property owners and developers, but making sure that downtown can be a neighborhood for all folks to live in, not just the wealthiest, because that would be what it would be if it's all market rate. But we really do need to go beyond 5% square footage for housing, closer to 50%. I have a lot more that I'd like to say that I certainly don't have time to, but I think, we should celebrate what we're trying to do here. In my opinion, I'm only 24, but maybe I missed the golden age of State Street. But I think right now what we have is better than it's ever been, and better than honestly any street I've seen in the United States. So let's learn from that success. And I'll thank you for your efforts here, and thank you for listening.
Thank you. Next, we have Ann Peterson.
Hi, everyone. I'm Ann Peterson. I'm the Executive Director of the Santa Barbara Trust for Historic Preservation. Thanks for the opportunity to speak. As you could probably guess from my title, I'm going to mention history and preservation in my comments. And I know everyone sees me coming 10 miles away thinking I'm going to try not to change anything. And I promise you that is not my philosophy. I think preservation is at its best when it can help people manage change. And this is a lot of change. And we've been through a lot of change as a community. So I just want to make the argument that I think our history and our sense of place should be put back into the project as soon as possible. I think it's not an overlay that's a coat of paint at the very end. It's really integral to how we see these spaces. I appreciate Roger Durling bringing that up in his questions. So specifically with the Civic District, I'm on the Plaza de la Guerra committee. We've been working for 4 years, and one of the tenets of that project was the history and the traditional uses of that plaza. And we've worked hard to maintain that continuity. So having places for public speech in the plaza is something that's a big priority. You know, Kristen tried not to mention the water feature. I'm going to try not to mention it either, but something that, you know, was considered for good reason in that space. So when we're thinking of a civic district, let's not replicate the same uses that have provided tradition and continuity in the plaza, create new ones. So what could be new civic uses? Maybe a visitor center kiosk, or food kiosks, or dog adoptions, or nonprofit showcase, some other civic uses. In Old Town, the Old Town Entertainment District dichotomy, but same place, is confusing to me. Old Town has its own really vibrant history. When we call it Old Town, that was the space before the earthquake that had diverse businesses, Chinese, Japanese, Mexican grocers, Jewish businesses, Eastern European immigrant businesses, all in the same place, sharing the space together. It has its own qualities. That memory has been lost, probably intentionally. It can be brought back. It can still be used as an entertainment district, but we have an opportunity here to bring back that continuity and show you know, how inclusive our history really was and is and can be in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. I now have a public comment slip that has asked to be read into the record. This is from Joseph Gigantino, Jr. The comment is, will short-term rentals be allowed in the proposed 3 districts? Those are all of the public, excuse me, sorry about that. I have one more public comment slip. This one is from Daiquiri Beeb. Is this person in the audience, or would they like me to read the comment? Okay, I'll read the comment that was left. It says, 1, smooth lane for skateboarders, 2, residential spaces, out of place and unnecessary. 3, keep outside dining for restaurants easier to use. 4, leave play spaces and love play spaces and splash pad idea. 5, restrooms need to be cleaner, prettier, larger, and in more locations. Those are all of the public, do you have a public comment you'd like to make? Sure. Come on up to the podium, and then I'll ask that you fill out a speaker slip after that.
I didn't know those were being signed. Anyway,
no problem.
My name is Edie Caldwell. I've lived here for 12 years. Before that, though, I lived in Santa Barbara. I've got 2 children, and we used to come down here every spring break. So there's a little detail that keeps showing up on these screens, and it's of the child with the flat water detail that comes up out of the sidewalk and splashes. Every time I see it, all I think of is, yes, all the children are going to want to do that, and then all the mothers are going to have to take them home to put them in dry clothes so that they can spend the rest of the day. So please keep that in mind and don't do it.
Or
All right, we'll now move to public comment online. If you would like to make a public comment, please click the raise hand icon in the control panel. Greta, do we have any public comment online?
We do. The first public comment online is Lorian Davey. Lorian, you're unmuted and you can go ahead and speak.
Hi, I have 3 questions, clarification questions on the slides. The first question I had was regarding the slide that showed potential housing locations. If you wanted to put that up, I was wondering about the little dots, the little magenta dots and the blue dots that indicated possible available for housing and pending housing. And I was wondering what made those available. Is it because they're owned by the city? My second question is, are we aiming for shade trees all along the whole 11 blocks to kind of duplicate what's going on now in the Old Town area, which is so delightful because of those shade trees? Or is it going to be more sunny in the rest of the areas? And my third question is, there have been several references to the term adaptive reuse. And I'm not in the in-crowd, I guess. I don't quite know what that means. I wonder if somebody could define that for me. Thank you.
The next speaker is Karen Luckett. Karen Luckett, you're unmuted. Go ahead and speak, please.
Hi, thank you for all your hard work and creativity. It's looking great. Just a couple comments I have. The 8-foot walkway is not really wide enough for when it's crowded and the wheelchairs want to get through. So I really want you to consider a wider walkway than the 8 feet right now, because it is pedestrian, so pedestrians should have the most access, but I also want to include access for people with walkers and wheelchairs, and I am part of the Access Advisory Committee to the City Council, so I have to advocate for accessibility. Maybe a designated lane in the middle of the street. One thing I want to say is that a lot of the beach cities in California are outlawing motorized vehicles in their pedestrian areas, i.e. e-bikes, because of the dangers. So many people have been injured. So I think this outlawing it is going to at some point come to the realization of the City Council, as it has to other beach communities. So that's the first thing. Let me get to the other thing. The other thing is food trucks. If we're not going to put food trucks on the main pedestrian area, how about considering them on the side streets adjacent? We also need more kiosks, food kiosks, or just tchotchke kiosks to sell things. That would make it more lively, marketplace, sort of Santa Fe Avenue down in LA. Also, I didn't see a lot of seating. I saw a lot of people standing in the drawings. So the more seats there are downtown, the more people are going to come to sit and enjoy, and the more life we're going to bring. I think that's it. So doing a great job, but let's find a place, a safe place for e-bikes on one of the adjacent streets. I know they're not going to be happy about it, but Thank you.
The next speaker online is Patrick Casey. Patrick
Hi.
Casey, go ahead.
Hi, and thank you for taking the time to let us speak on this topic. Today we wrapped up another game of planning a vision without a clear direction of what we can or can't do, what we can afford. And once again, we get a one-sided perspective with a take it or leave it approach. The poor last mid guy pretty much disappeared after he presented an idea that differed from the vision. Earlier today, you spoke about an 8-foot sidewalk and said they were there because they were currently existing in a guideline, but you don't even bring transportation guidelines that already exist, mainly because they differ from the vision you try to present. You spoke about economic vitality and trying to amplify the already success of the Arts District. Please explain what data was compiled that allowed you to call this an economic success. Have you all of the property owners and all of the business owners in that area to generate this data? And legally valid claim to make? If you haven't spoken to any of these people, it's time you did. You spoke about flexibility and adaptability, but you didn't talk about parklets, about portability. You spoke about making this designed for the locals. Yet even after all the public removal of civic parades and special events from State Street, for this exercise and this planning, you didn't even consider what it would take to bring it back. That's because it's not part of your, and you don't want it to come back. This committee was supposed to be assembled to bring a deputy perspective like our makeup, but all we was a one-sided contingency got their own vision, irregardless of what the community wants or desires. I ask you to please take a look at all of these things. If you want equality in the 500 block, you need equality everywhere. You guys are not a planning department. You don't have the right to pick and choose where a restaurant should go or where to go. That's not your job here. Your job is to work with what we can afford and what we can do legally. Thank you.
The next speaker is Sullivan Israel. Sullivan Israel, go ahead and speak.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Excellent. Hi, I would like to echo the sentiments expressed by a gentleman earlier. This is so exciting, and this is really such a great opportunity to do something incredible in our city. And you guys on the committee, you are on the forefront of this super exciting and novel movement, basically, to transform the downtown. So whatever we do, I'm sure you guys are going to make sure that it's great. And I love all the consideration that's being put in and the drawings presented today. We sent in, I am the leader of a local group called Strong Town Santa Barbara. We focus on urban planning advocacy. We sent in a very long public comment letter. Somehow it got copied in there twice. It's the second one, that's the up-to-date one. One of the most important things in there is a bike study that we did. I know that today is not about mobility, but we did just do the study, so I'm bringing it up. We decided to answer some of the questions that you members of the committee had during the last meeting. So a bunch of people volunteered their time. They went out on 3 different days for many hours, and we counted bikes and surveyed cyclists. We surveyed over 151, asked them if they were spending money, asked them their age, asked them where they were from. And we found some very interesting results that I think everyone on the committee should look at. I published the results in an article in the Montecito Journal last month, and that article is linked in the public comment letter. I'll also be sending in a full report. I've met with some of you, I've heard your concerns, and so we've worked that into the public comment letter too. If any of you on the committee would like to meet with me or any members of Strong Towns, please reach out. We have a website, and the main Strong Towns national website has fantastic urban planning articles, and I encourage all of you to immerse yourself in the world of online urban planning. There's tons of it. I would also say one of the best things an urban designer can do, and you guys basically are urban designers now, is to visit the street, go grab a drink, go to Wild Works or Night Lizard, go grab a taco, a Santa Barbara taco, or just go and sit on the Adirondack chairs and just look around, see how many kids you see where people are bumping into each other, see how many people bike by and what they're doing. And then maybe take some notes. Those are my thoughts for today, and I hope to hear from some of you soon. Thank you.
The last raised hand is Lee Heller. Lee Heller, go ahead and speak.
Thank you so much. I want to also begin and thank this committee for the incredibly hard work you've been doing and the challenge you are facing. And to echo some of Ian Baukie's and Ann Peterson's remarks, certainly inclusionary housing is going to make a huge difference, as well as defining the character of these neighborhoods that we're trying to develop. We're a very small city to develop districts, but it's a promising approach to create character in different areas of State Street so that there isn't the uniformity that creates a kind of monotony that some people are concerned about. I think a lot of people are struggling with the fact that you're not covering everything today, and it's not possible to do that. We can't talk about mobility, housing, and everything else in one meeting, or we'd be here for 3 days straight. So I hope people can be patient with the process as different issues get explored. But I mostly want to say I appreciate and support this effort to respond to the community's desire to have a pedestrian-focused downtown with character that really brings civic engagement and community presence. Thank you so much.
That's the last speaker online, thank you.
There are no additional public comments at this time, so we can close public comment.
Okay, let's close public comment, and I will take us then to committee comments in that regard. Tess, do you want to open that discussion?
Yes, thank you, Chair Davis. So in the staff memo that you all received at the bottom, there were these discussion topics listed. And so we want to hear from the committee what you think of the vision for the State Street Master Plan area, and specifically the vision for each of the 3 districts that were presented today. We want to also touch on the different district identities and also the locations for each district, and specifically if you think the blocks are in the right districts, or if you have suggestions for changes there. In terms of the center, so the core or civic district, and then the arts district and Old Town, we want to hear from the committee if you think it makes sense to really focus the most investment or the greatest amount of changes in that civic district space and highlight what's existing and what's successful in the other 2 districts, or if you think that should be different. And then we do want to touch on the enhanced connection that you saw tonight around Anapamu Street that leads a connection from the courthouse, Library Plaza, and State Street. That's one of multiple different options, so we want to hear from the committee whether that's something that you would like to see more of in the plan, and if you'd like to see that in each of the districts, or if you'd like to see more than one of those connections on the 0 blocks in each of the districts. And then we are hoping to hear from you about creating a larger public space in the civic district. So that was the what if scenario, the idea that we could create a space that's larger than the street. And then the other item we are hoping to hear about is the idea of a gateway or enhancing the 400 block entry point. And if you support the idea of a gateway type component in that space, if you think that that should exist on Gutierrez and State Street, and if there are other areas that you'd like to see that as well. So those are the questions. If you have certain, there'll be a chance for everybody to provide comment. If there's certain items that you were hoping to touch on in particular, I encourage you to do so. And I'll stop there.
Great, thank you. So I will just re-emphasize Tessa's point. We're trying to get input on these particular items. And yes, we're going to have lots of comments on housing and other things later, but on these particular items, I am going to call on each of you, and again, give your comments as you may, and try to keep them focused the best that you can. I'm going to start with Marge. Mike?
Thank you, Chair Davis. I just want to applaud city staff and MIG, and most importantly, the community for their input, and this committee, because I know it hasn't been easy. I really appreciate the presentation today. I like that it's a little more high level and we can get into the weeds a little bit later. The overall vision, I think, is great. I do think that we need to incorporate a shuttle on State Street. I've heard that a lot from lots of folks. How we do it and which blocks we do it, I think will be important, but again, we can study that. I love the 3 unique districts. When I was a commercial real estate developer, we used to call the area where we developed the public market in Alma del Pueblo the Performing Arts and Cultural District. That's how we refer to it, and I'm really proud of the community of businesses that have come together to really create the Arts District. I think that's been very, very important for those folks in that area, those businesses. They are truly 3 distinct districts, and I think there is such a unique opportunity to create the civic identity in that civic center area at the El Paseo, with housing, with a larger space that can be utilized by the community to create some public-private partnerships with the city to have some live-work art space. I think these are all very, very important things that the city of Santa Barbara, the leaders of the city of Santa Barbara, this is such, I've called it over and over again, a once-in-a-generation opportunity to really do something special here. And so I really hope that we have the leadership to do that. The amplification, I think I touched on that, Old Town and the Arts District. You know, I completely agree with the comments about highlighting the historic nature of Santa Barbara. We have some amazing architecture that people have no idea who designed the buildings, what the economic use of those buildings were during the time that they were built. It's not just the architecture that makes a building historic, it's also why it was built and what was it used for. So I think when we were talking about this, I was sort of, when Tess was saying, yes, you know, we could have monuments that talk about this building or that building. I mean, I was sort of sitting here fantasizing what that would look like and how really interesting that could be. So I think there's a really unique opportunity there because there are so many kids that grow up in this city that have no idea what the historic background or nature of Santa Barbara really is. I think that the gateway to the promenade on the 400 block, you know, is something that really needs to be studied. And I'm not saying it shouldn't happen. I just think that is, I just walked State Street, I was telling Diane, and it's very interesting how wide that street gets in the 400 block. It's very different than the rest of State Street, which becomes more narrow. And I don't know what the width is, but I think that we do need to study that so that it isn't something that we wanted to do and didn't do it well. And so if we do it, I think there's going to be some real landscape opportunities that need to happen in order to really make that special. I think it's very important that at each district, if you will, the Old Town, the core, or the core district and the Arts District, there should be prominent wayfinding for the businesses that are on that block so that people know. I will tell you that, you know, it takes a lot of time, energy, and money to draw people to the Arts District. Locals go to the Arts District, but tourists don't get that far up. And I think that having appropriate wayfinding so that, wow, here I am in Old Town, what's in Old Town? You know, and you can see what's there. And you get to the Civic Center area and, oh wow, look, there's this shop or that shop. And then I'll just end with housing. because the success of any city, of any downtown, is having eyes on the street. And if we, and we must, as a community, and I'm going to say this, I'm going to underscore it, we must, as a community, create opportunities for affordability. Many of you don't know this, but in the last 9 months, I have become the Chief Real Estate Officer of Dignity Moves. And I know firsthand what happens when we lock people out of housing. And we can no longer do it in Santa Barbara. We have got to make it a priority first and foremost. And so I urge, again, the leadership of this city to look at this not by putting 10% or 15% affordability into a project. We have empty parking garages that we could build on top of with public-private partnerships. There's excess land in this city. We could incentivize private property owners. We have got to engage in public-private partnerships to create affordability so young people, like the young man that spoke earlier, can stay in this city. So, Councilmember Jordan, so your kids can stay in this city so that we can have a diverse, dynamic community. And the only way we're going to do it is by creating affordability. So thank you.
Thank you, Marge. Diane?
Well, that's a hard act to follow. So I'll start with housing and say, yes, I absolutely, positively agree, and I think we need to spend some time talking about it. But I'm going to talk about the issues that are before us today. I think the vision for the overall State Street Promenade was great. This was a much, I think it helped that we didn't interrupt the presentation. It was much easier to absorb that way. But I really liked the concepts and ideas that MIG presented, and I really appreciate them listening, I think, to individual members of the community and members of this advisory council. I really like the districts. I think it's going to be really important to come up with some unique features for each of the districts so they are more identifiable than they appear in this presentation today. I think the initial focus of public dollars ought to be in two areas. One is the gateway block. So I've told other people this story, but I'll tell the group this story. I spent a lot of time down at the waterfront and in the Funk Zone and on State Street. And if I were a tourist staying in the Funk Zone or waterfront area and I started walking up State Street, I would face first the underpass, which thank goodness is going to be improved, and I think that'll be fantastic. But then so let's just assume the underpass is improved, and then you get to the 400 block of State Street. If I were a tourist in this area and I didn't know what was beyond, I might just turn around and say, forget it, I'm going to go back. Because I thought the waterfront was beautiful and the Funk Zone is fun, and I don't need to go that any further. So I really, really think that improving the 400 block is just essential. And I think that block deserves it. It needs some love. So I would spend money there first, public dollars there first, and in the Civic District. Because the Civic District is kind of the same deal, People don't get necessarily all the way to the Arts District because they walk through this sort of void area. So those would be my two priorities. Doesn't mean other things can't happen in those other districts initially. I mean, we need to clean up some outdoor dining issues and things like that, but in terms of public dollars, I think that's where it should go. In terms of a large-scale event space in the Civic District, I like the idea, but I don't know how that interacts with De La Guerra Plaza. It almost feels like it's competing, and it would be great if those buildings between De La Guerra Plaza and State Street didn't exist, and it really just flowed better. But I don't really know how to make that happen. So I'm a little bit conflicted about the public space, large public space on, in the civic area.
Great, thank you. Michael?
Quick, in terms of the length of the corridor, I think, personally, I believe we could stop at Victoria. I think once you go Victoria to Sola, it's a completely different feel. It has on-street parking, has driveways, there's an intersection with an alley, and I think we'd be trying to force something into the Victoria to Sola block. So I would be for stopping at Victoria. In response to some of the public comments, and this, I had it written down for a while also, the 8-foot sidewalk, that's, I think, 2 passing 2 that would be tight. So I think we need to look for something wider. And I appreciate the concept, I think it was slide 25, the cross-section had the 10-foot sidewalks. I think that's better. And also with that concept, it moved the dining from in front of the buildings to the other side of the pedestrian walkway. I'm supportive of that because we can't assume that every building is going to be a restaurant forever, or some buildings won't become restaurants, and you'll end up with a situation where you have empty patios or restaurants without patios. And that also goes back to the flexibility concept that this committee has discussed quite a bit. If it were on the street side of the pedestrian walkway, if the restaurant did not want to lease that space from the city, or whatever the arrangement is, the city could come in and do the play structure there, or something where it gives you options rather than having empty space. This may seem petty, but on your slide for the play area, it showed a grassy grass, which just with my experience, I imagine that you would have a bunch of kids rolling around and a bunch of dogs using it as a bathroom. So those two probably don't go together, but that does also beg the question, if housing is part of it, and Californians love their dogs, you do probably need a little grassy area here and there, or some kind of earth end for the dogs to take care of themselves. And then just a general comment, I think kind of my opinion is the concepts look too busy, that there is going to be Tuesday afternoon in February and Saturday afternoon in August, and they're completely different demands, and it's going to have to work for both. And the Tuesday afternoon in February, I just was thinking it's like Chevy Chase walking around Wally Road when it's closed. It needs to work for when it's busy and when it's not busy. Yes, I'm in support of some type of gateway, and it should be looked at further, and I 100% agree with Diane on De La Guerra Plaza.
Thank you so much, Michael. I'm going to just go down the line here. Ed, you're next.
Thank you. I'm going to kind of follow up on my question of why Sola Street and why the 400 block. I look at the three districts, and there's really no definition of place in core. There isn't even maybe a good definition of place in Civic Center. Whereas, the Arts District and Old Town define themselves. And I'm wondering if we shouldn't maybe explore having 2 districts. The Old Town that maybe would run up a little further, maybe as far as, Cannon Perdido, maybe, and the Arts District that would go from Victoria down to Cannon Perdido. I think there's a real good opportunity to increase the viability and the vibrancy of the Arts District. You don't have to do a lot to increase the vibrancy of the Old Town District to amplify it. But I don't know that the core really is something which is defined or definable. So I would say maybe you have 2 districts and not 3. And it might be easier to phase 2 districts as opposed to 3, but I think it would be something that should be explored. But I agree. I think Sola Street's going too far. I'm not going to comment on balance here, although I have a tendency to offend people or groups. And I was down at Ventura Main Street Mall this weekend, and I was also down there 4 or 5 days earlier during midweek. And it's no different than our downtown, our State Street, in that midweek there's nothing going on, and on the weekend a lot more activity. The problem I see, and we've got to be careful about it from the standpoint of what goes into the shops, is that it appeared that the 3 or 4 blocks that I walked on in Ventura, predominantly antique stores and their derivatives, and used clothing stores and their derivatives. And those aren't the things that are going to attract citizens, our own people downtown, and tourists necessarily, so on and so forth. So I think we've got to be real careful about how we formulate and amplify these districts, the Arts District and the Old Town District. Real careful, and I think Ventura's got a lot going for it, but I just want to make sure that we do something different.
Go ahead, Zoe.
Thank you. First of all, I want to say to staff, really appreciate getting all this in advance, the staff report and this. It helped process it beforehand, which I think I'm used to as having been on city committees before, to get my mind right, to know what questions I want to ask or things like that, and to the chair for structuring the meeting with the presentation, question, public comment, and committee comments. I think it's been a nice, peaceful meeting so far. I promise not to disrupt that now. And I appreciate how it's been laid out. I do like the districts. I think they make sense. I think that the Arts District and Old Town are sort of predefined and make sense. And we as a community get to define the middle piece and the Civic Center piece. And we have so many important institutions in that middle, and several of which are going to be improved sort of alongside of this or before this. So the De La Guerra Plaza, very exciting what's going on with that. The Library Plaza, also very exciting. And that's going to, I think, be a catalyst in a big way. Those things together will be a big catalyst for bringing people to a space and investment in the space that will then spill over into this. As far as the large community space in the Civic Center zone or district, maybe, but again, is it just a copy of De La Guerra Plaza, or is it something different? I know in one of the charrettes that I participated in, one of the groups was like, let's just knock these buildings down, and, it's not that simple, but that was one of the pieces, right, to connect more than just Stork Placita, to connect De La Guerra Plaza into State Street. So I think it's an interesting thing to talk about, but obviously there's some practical matters there. The Gateway, the 400 block, agree. It's funny, as I was standing up over here, I was looking at this parade celebrating the Santa Barbara Mission Centennial Anniversary, Centennial Arch on the corner of State and Figueroa Streets, which is actually a really interesting picture, and I wonder how long that was up for, but maybe that's not quite the look we go for, but something to welcome folks, and I think it's going to be such a beautiful change with the underpass project that it will inspire creativity and find a way to, welcome people further up. One thing about the Anapamu piece, I do think enhancing the connection, definitely, because of the library and Library Plaza and the other, into the sort of county and the county building and the courthouse. I would say, I don't want to edge too much into transportation, but we're talking about a street that we hadn't really talked about before. I do think it's a really important cross street for vehicle traffic. I know a lot of buses connect and go over to Anacapa that way, so I would say, I would think an enhanced connection for sure, better streetscaping, but you might need a little more, also to get into the Granada Garage, you might need a little more than 20 feet. It's a pretty tight squeeze now, but just thinking about that and thinking about drop off for the Granada too. So yes, to enhancing the connection, but maybe not just carbon copying the sort of layout we're thinking about for State Street. Let's see. As far as in the concepts, I love the play elements. I think that places, other cities I've been to that have those kinds of things, they're always being used. I love the Channel Island. I imagine it being that kind of soft, spongy stuff. I think that's a great idea. All the, turns out water features are very controversial no matter where you have them. But I think as we think of climate adaptation, ways to cool down is really important. We're lucky to have a tree canopy, but shade structures and things like that. We've been very lucky that it's been quite nice to live in Santa Barbara weather-wise. It's gonna get weird and bad everywhere, and it will happen here too, so we need to be prepared to still have people enjoy outdoor spaces safely without, burn it up. So, or getting soaked or floating away or what have you. So I think all those things are important elements. I love that we're starting to see more public amenities and open seating where you could bring your lunch that maybe you brought from home, or when you live in that downtown neighborhood, you made something in your kitchen and you walked out and you're able to eat there. It's very important to me that people be able to exist and enjoy the space without purchasing something. Most people will, just not as, like, people are gonna come and go to restaurants. They're just gonna do it. It's gonna happen. It's gonna keep happening. Certainly happens a lot now. But to be able to go down, read a book, drink a cup of coffee, and not have to pay for the privilege, I think is really important to keep in mind. Also, I so appreciate the public commenter bringing up public restrooms. I think about that all the time. I did before I was pregnant, but now I really think about it all the time. The fact that we have one public restroom downtown is sort of wild and unacceptable. And so starting to incorporate, we're not gonna have a whole meeting on public restrooms, right? We could, but we probably aren't. I just wanna make sure that we keep thinking about how that's gonna work, because I think it's an important public health item. History, I so appreciate what Dr. Peterson said about it can help us through with change, because there's so much history in Santa Barbara that is not, no offense Ed, red tile roofs and the Spanish colonial revival. Like, there's so much, and a lot of that, as Ann said, has been erased perhaps on purpose throughout our history, right? And so all of those different pieces could be incorporated in design, there could be interpretive signage. I think that should be throughout the downtown. And yeah, I think there are a lot of great opportunities there. One more thing. So with regards to the vision for the overall State Street Promenade, so as I was reading the staff report before the meeting, there are a couple things that popped out to me as part of the vision for the State Street Promenade / Grand Paseo. And since we do mention visions here and there and they get repeated and we've sort of stamped them throughout the process, I do actually think it's important, like what's written here, because if we sort of agree on this, we're gonna see it over and over. So there were just a couple of things that jumped out at me that I thought might be important to address or to possibly change. The first thing that popped out to me is it is the healthiest, most thriving part of Santa Barbara. we could go into like how that's going to make other parts of Santa Barbara feel, but I think maybe wording that in a way of it is a healthy and thriving part of Santa Barbara, because I don't know that it needs to be the most, right? Maybe where people live, maybe it's, you know, on the east side, maybe it's on the west side. So I think it's important to not necessarily, say, this is it, this is our number one priority, which people in those neighborhoods already think the city thinks, right? So just to be careful about that. And then the accessible to all types of people, families, generations, income levels, abilities, and diversities. The diversities thing, I don't know what that means. All types of diversities. It kind of just seems like we threw a buzzword in there. So if it can either better be defined or not, I think we address diversity in other places. And then the last piece is when it has, it reflects, a lot of these, you know, these are separated by semicolons. It says our history, the Chumash and other indigenous people, the diversity of our community, and is welcoming to them all. I've said this before, but I just want to make sure we're not saying the Chumash, which is a thing from history, but is still, right, a living group of people. So if they're going to be listed this way, I'd put the Chumash before that, before history. But I just want to make sure that we're not just kind of throwing buzzwords around, but actually are intentional about who we want to welcome in and who we think this space, you know, belongs to, has belonged to, and should continue to belong to. And I think that covers it. Thanks.
Robin.
First of all, I want to just start by thanking all of the people who came together to make this happen, and the public for their patience in this process, and also their really thoughtful comment and participation. It's really significant, and what we're doing today and we're doing over this past year is really momentous for our community. So I just want to honor and respect everybody who has contributed. Regarding this design, I think it's really an excellent vision. I think it's thoughtful, and it's a design based on our current existing conditions and takes into consideration the challenges of some of those spaces. So I really like the vision as it was presented, and a few elements that I think are particularly quality elements of the design are the elements of the sense of place and the design connections that create a meandering and sort of a draw to the next space. And it connects really some of our best assets of downtown, and it creates a way to further, as it's been said, amplify. Certainly like the emphasis on housing, and particularly the emphasis on education, because I think we can utilize the space not only to honor our past, but create what we want our future to look like through the programming and the way the space sits and feels as you walk through it. I like the thoughtful, non-linear connections, and thinking about the signage and wayfinding elements that draw you through those paseos, particularly through the elements of sound and light, and considering those things. As we were talking about the water feature, I want to remind folks that water features don't have to be touchable and you don't get wet. More so in the direction of things like the water feature that's in the La Arcada, which is this beautiful sound that you're sitting next to and you're experiencing these turtles, or next to, say, a riverbed, and that's the sound that you sort of are relaxing into the space. I'm envisioning one of these spaces or multiple spaces that have these interesting senses of sound that differentiate the space. And so when I saw the fountains, I didn't think of getting wet, but more so the sound that sort of like solidifies a sense of place that you can enjoy and feel. Also with lighting, I think through the paseos and the way that it can change will draw you to the next space. I also appreciated the fact that there was some thoughtful color pops throughout the space, whether it was through signage or through these artful design elements, because the space as it is right now is very white and green and orange. And we really do need to break up that space, and so seeing that playful use of color is really significant and nice to see in there. And I think in regards to the 3 different districts, I think that is really thoughtful and does make sense. I like the gateway into the 400 block. I think the Anapamu connection, enhancing that, I agree with Hillary in terms of the enhanced connection, but I do think the elements of more of like, say, a plaza on Anapamu is a nice to have, but not a need to have. I think that space is absolutely phenomenal as it is, and that the courthouse is just this iconic space that adding to it would be nice, but does it have to be? I think there's more need to put a lot of emphasis in that core civic space that was discussed, because it is a space that needs a lot of life and a lot of investment. So that's where I would put money, time, interest, and energy. And those are the end of my comments. Thank you.
I'm actually going to skip over you, Chris. I'm going to do the 3 council people last, if you don't mind. I want to go to Peter Lewis, if he's still online. Peter, you still there?
Yes, I am. Thanks, Dave. I support all the items under discussion with the exception of the last 2. I don't think we need to create a large-scale community event space in the Civic Center. I think, as people have pointed out, the De La Guerra Plaza would be an appropriate place for that. So I think that committee's working on that. I think they're finding solutions, and they need to incorporate that requirement. I also kind of agree with Robin on the Anapamu question. To me, there's been so much significant investment up there that the Library Plaza is going to naturally organically allow people to make that connection back to State Street. I don't think that's a priority. I think the first ones are the priority. And lastly, I'll go back to the 8-foot width, which I find really problematic and inadequate. And I'll use as my example the blocks I know best. The 400 block currently has a sidewalk ranging from 7 to 10 feet in width. The east side's a little bit different than the west side. The east side's a little more generous. It goes from 8 feet to 10 feet in width. Now, the 500 and 600 block have widths of 12 to 17 feet in width. So it's, almost double in some places in width. And one of the reasons the 500 and 600 blocks are successful. And I think those are really good examples to walk and to understand what works and what doesn't work. And the other thing that struck me and led me to the question on what were the heritage trees. In the 400 block of State Street, all the trees are within 9 to 10 feet of the face of the building. So the section that we are looking at as a possibility on page 24, unless you took down all the trees in the 400 block, that's not a possible solution. Now, the what if on page 25 is actually pretty impressive, because that design solution would allow you to keep all the existing trees in the 400 block. So, and again, if you go to the 500 and 600 block, the trees are 12 to 18 feet inside the face of the building. So even though we're dealing with the exact same 80-foot right of way,
because they also proposing.
If you're on
Looks like
Zoom
I'm-
and you're not, Peter, can you please mute? Peter, go ahead.
At any rate, so on the 500 block, the trees are more inset from the face of buildings. And if you just walk those 3 blocks, you will really get what I'm saying. The 400 block was a poorly designed block. It has inadequate sidewalks. They already meet that 8-foot, what is depicted on all of our districts. And to me, if we ended up with 8-foot circulation as the walking width, we would have really gone backwards. So I encourage everyone to kind of do the walk, take a look, see where the trees are. I like page 25. I think it makes a world of sense. Lastly, on my comments, one thing I really worry about is, just like we're not really dealing with housing and how we can get people to build it, the other thing is I don't feel like we're talking to retailers, and economic vitality is driving this formation of this committee, and we have to understand the way a retailer will think. And it's one of the reasons I think page 25 works as a section better than pushing all the sidewalk tables up. It works great for restaurants, but it doesn't necessarily work for retailers. And we need to make sure we understand what is in our best interest for all businesses downtown, and not just the food and beverage people. So that concludes my comments. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Peter. Christian Miller.
Thank you so much, and thank you, Peter. I too have been first of all, let me just say I love this tonight, and I love the districts. I have been looking for economic data, and even pushing the group a little bit to see if there was a way to have business economic data that flowed into causing the design to be the way we want it to be. And I realize there's some, it's hard to do, but one of the things I want to suggest is that perhaps if we at least maybe set a set of standards for ourselves of 6 business categories that in our Chamber of Commerce groups we've been talking about wanting to emphasize, and that being diversified food and beverage, office and trade, innovative retail, services and personal care, experiential hospitality, and housing. And bear with me as I go through this list, but if we sort of set our sights on going toward those 6 business categories and ways for economic vitality, perhaps then that helps us design elements in each of the districts that support maybe an emphasis on each of those. So for instance, if we're trying to support diversified food and beverage, you have not only outdoor dining, but as Robin mentioned, the shared dining areas. For office and retail, this is your small entertainment and picnic areas for people who are working in those offices to come out at times. Your innovative retail is your kiosks and product demonstrations. Services and personal care, here's a way for you to do your outdoor yoga. Do you have an exercise area or a dog park? For experiential hospitality, I would love to see an outdoor kitchen with so where we could do cooking classes at times. How about a wine tasting? And then with housing and for everyone, the elements of the farmers market and small market produce. You can't make each district, only one thing, but if we have an emphasis on each of these areas, in some of the areas, it can help us support those business areas more. I also want to just say with the districts, I think we're still struggling with what to call each of these, and I don't have the answer, but I am going to suggest that that in some time, what's right now being called the arts district, maybe we consider it being the cultural district. I think we're struggling the most with that center area, if we call it the celebration, civic. What about somewhere in the staff report, it was called the Grand Paseo? What if we call the center area the Grand Paseo? And then we do still have visitors in our centers asking am I in the shopping district? Where is the shopping district? So I don't know if we make one of the 3 areas the shopping district, but we do. I would ask that we consider making that more obvious and apparent. Sorry, I'm talking fast because it's after 7 o'clock. Somebody talked about the chicken or the egg, and I just want to relate that to business vitality and the economy there, that the more people there are downtown, including a variety of people who live there, people from the South Coast who are visiting, and then actual visitors. That all helps the local economy and brings us better businesses. Having the right businesses in the right place also brings us more people. I don't have a grand solution to that either, but maybe if we work on both together, they'll come together. The last thing is, I like these lists in the staff report under each of the areas where there are lists of elements that would be included, and maybe we use those to get a little more specific in each of the areas of checking off which ones we have in each of the districts. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Suzanne?
Okay, I will try to be concise and to the point. First of all, I think the direction of the 3 districts and the different characters, I think this is a good direction. It seems to make a lot of sense because that is the way it is, and we're working off of that. I've been doing a lot of thinking about the gateway, and I agree with Diane that the 400 block needs some TLC. It needs something because it is an entrance point from the beach. But that is not my entrance point to State Street. I never come that way. I think there's other entrance points, there's other gateways that we can develop for locals that arrive. Coming off of Carrillo, coming from the freeway, coming from the bus stop or the bus station, I think that is a main entrance to downtown that needs some attention. And I think that could be another gateway. And so I don't look at it as just one gateway to State Street, because people come from different ways. There's the tourists that come from the beach. There's people that come from the freeway. And so that's what I wanted to just kind of think about and dealing with other gateways. I think the Anapamu Street is kind of a gateway to the Arts District. So I think I like the development of treating that street a little differently and doing like sort of an approach. And I understand comments of not restricting it to the way it's being used now or for transportation or buses and things like that. But I do like that attention to including Anapamu and a connection to the courthouse. I think that is another gateway. The other comment the other item I wanted to respond to was where to put the focus. And definitely I agree that the center area and developing the core or the civic area, that was where we could probably put a lot more, whatever you want to call it, funding or attention, because the other areas have things that work, we can just sort of help. And when this is kind of creating something anew. And I do like the idea of creating a large community open space, but then at what cost, right? Something has to give, and I don't know what that would be. And I do think De La Guerra Plaza, which is already there, and it's right in, there has to be a better connection, or somehow a better connection with De La Guerra Plaza. And I do like the idea of this open space, create a larger open space. I noticed one of the slides had a picture of a large open space, and I'm like, well, where's that? We don't have that necessarily, but anyway, so those are my main comments at this time.
Great, thank you. Ken?
Well, I think this discussion of the zones, districts, has been really additive. So I'm coming away from this meeting, feeling more of a sense of directionality. And Ed made me think about this question about, do we have 2 zones or 3 zones here? But I also then found I really resonated with Hillary's comment that we collectively are going to create that center zone. I think that's right. And it's one of the things that I feel like is, downtown, this promenade is going to be engaging in as much as we engage the people of Santa Barbara. And that's the place to do it, to me. Kind Councilwoman Sned and others talk so much about this idea of communal life and civic life and a place for people to come together. And I want to just remind us that we have these incredible assets in this community of civic organizations and nonprofit organizations and educational organizations. We are so rich in this. I feel like we just need to create the canvas that they can all come and partner with us to fill it up with Santa Barbara. We need to have that space. And I'm open to it being someplace else, but to me, it's in that center space. I have to say that the slide that took my breath away when I first saw it was the slide you just talked about, Suzanne. So that is from De La Guerra Plaza looking to the Balboa Building. And it is a real place. It just happens that there's a few buildings that are there right now. But it took my breath away from a totally center space that could be so inviting to our community and to all of our people and groups and others coming together that really feels like Santa Barbara. I don't know, several people talked about State Street being so linear. It is. It's this long channel with 2, 3, 4-story buildings on each side. So personally, whether it's this area or whether it's an area in Paseo Nuevo, or whether one day we wake up and the Macy's building has just disappeared and it's turned into a park, all I can say is I would love for us to be thinking big because a real public space, and De La Guerra Plaza is that, but there's something about it being disconnected from State Street that I mean, I've been watching it. My office has been on it for 25 years. At the HLC meeting, there was one of the members who said, it's a sad space. It is. It is a sad space. It shouldn't be a sad space. And I'm very excited for the potential changes that are proposed. But this picture took my breath away. So I just wanted to name that. And the last thing I just have to say to Matt is this. It took me 3 or 4 years of living in Santa Barbara before I could pronounce Anapamu. And you got it right every time today. So I think you should get a gold star for that. There you go.
Thank you, Ken. Okay, I'm going to move to the council people. Kristen Snedden, Councilmember Snedden.
Okay, thank you. This is really exciting, I have to say, just right off. I'm going to go down the bullet points and then just add some extra comments there after. So to the overall State Street Promenade vision, yes, overall. I mean, this direction that we're heading is, I think, the right direction. Obviously, we'll work out the details. On the 3 unique districts and their boundaries, yes, but I don't want to duplicate, as many have said, the Civic Center functionality of De La Guerra Plaza, because it is off of State Street, but it's a locals space that is really sort of special to public engagement and public speaking and protest and a lot of historical uses in that area. So I do think it's a little bit interesting to maybe think of a larger picture meander, that as you have the Old Town, which I don't love the name Old Town. I think I don't want to confuse this with Old Town Goleta or like efforts to revitalize usually what you called an Old Town. I think it maybe needs a different name to identify it, but a sort of meander from Old Town and then civic engagement through the plaza and then to the Arts District. But I think one of the reasons we're having such a hard time sort of identifying the identity of that middle block is that we don't know yet what Nordstrom and Macy's, may they rest in peace, what they're going to be. And there's so many different ideas. I mean, if it's housing, what age of housing? Does it need to be a park right there? If it's a satellite university campus, that could be a whole different kind of space in there. So it's really hard to have sort of prepackaged identity in that space. So Ken, to your point too about us and Hillary too of making it what we want it to be, but it definitely needs to be in consideration of what the vacuous spaces that aren't being occupied right now become. So just kind of holding a placeholder for that as we continue to talk about it. Let's see, amplifying the existing Old Town, yes. And I liked the considering the adjacent blocks in the Arts District, the public comments on that too, that's part of that Arts District that's sort of already defined, so we need to be sort of tying that in or considering tying that in also. And then the consideration of the drop-off in front of the Granada Theater. Also in the Old Town, maybe a different name for it, but bringing in those elements that Ann Peterson brought up, the sort of a lot of different cultural mix in that area that maybe could be highlighted more. So again, on that middle district, I agree. I don't think we quite have the name for it yet or what the identity might be. In the designing the 400 block as the gateway, something definitely needs to be done there. Right now, you walk up it, and it's Diane that pointed this out to me, and there's the ugliest K-rails that they almost signal, don't come here, stay back. So we need to do something with that. But I really like the highlight of that there are so many different gateways to this area. And, when I was really young, I think we visited Santa Barbara. It was back when there was the stoplight and there was the, Fifi's ice cream there. And my mom and I got off the highway and we looked everywhere for the courthouse. And this was before Google Maps, obviously, but we never found it. We never found the Mission. We never found the courthouse. And it wasn't for lack of trying. So I think that the idea that where locals have their gateway is not where people visiting have the gateway. So I think that's a really important consideration there too. Creating a large-scale community event space in the Civic Center, maybe. I'm on the maybe category on that. I think we still need to know what it's going to become. Enhancing that connection, yes, between State Street and the library. So then I'll just go quickly through some other comments that came up throughout. I do like the consideration of the paseos. I'm happy that they're in there. I don't think we're quite there yet on how to incorporate them. I'm not sure that paseos spilling out into undefined plaza crosswalks is exactly it yet, but I think having them in the plan is a good first step. I'm just not sure we're all the way there on that. Shuttle service, I know it's mobility later, but just, yes, we need that. I like the connectivity to Library Plaza, but I also agree that thoroughfare with Anapamu is just so essential for crosstown, so I'm not sure how that goes in. I really like the meanders of that center pathway. I'd like it to be a little bit more meandery and organic. I know this is just preliminary, but it's really angular looking at this point, and I think it could be just a little bit more interesting in that way. I really want to reiterate what Roger was saying about the importance of elevating Santa Barbara history and heritage, and then also tying into what Hillary was saying, yes, please include the Chumash history here, but also the current Chumash community. This is a living community here. This is not history, it's now. And I think we really need to engage the conversation earlier rather than later, sort of as we're defining these spaces and recognizing that we're on unceded territory and we need to maybe acknowledge that and act sooner as part of the conversation. Let me be really clear here. Housing. Yes, I think we're all clear on that. And I'm glad that we'll be discussing that further. And really thank you to Diane for highlighting that we just cannot keep talking until we talk about where are these identified housing priorities. And the adaptive reuse is an important part of that conversation. And then again, a lot of people have different ideas about what's going to happen with the Macy's space, the Nordstrom space, and those are big hanging questions that will help us sort of define that middle area. including like, you know, a grocery store. It's a pretty much a food desert through there, unless you're talking about just restaurants. I mean, if we are going to have housing, that kind of thing. And but it came up in public comment at a different meeting, but school possibilities also, and not to bog this down, but I'm just going to sprinkle that comment in here now. I like the consideration of extending the canopy. Very much in agreement with Peter Lewis's comments about the 8 feet not being wide enough, so that would be like the absolute bare minimum. Restrooms, and the public comment, humanized restrooms. And Hillary, congratulations. And just remembering Nordstrom, it wasn't just a restroom, it was a family room. You could nurse your children, you could change them out of their outfits that they got wet in the water feature or whatever. It was a really important space that I sorely miss in many ways, and there is no replacement for that now, so that's sort of an immediate, but we really should be considering that if we're hoping people are going to be using this like park space. We need to have not just individual stalls, but family restrooms and spaces for all kinds of considerations. More lighting, I know that's going to come later, but I just want to throw that out there, that lighting will be important. Love the community tables idea in some areas. I think that's a really great idea. And I'm just going to go out on a limb here. I really like a little bit of grass or green here or there. Back to the slide that took your breath away. There are people lying down around that fountain. And I mean, it's just like begging for a little softness or greenery. And so as we're sort of hardscaping things, more than just a few trees, but really we've got to green up the space somehow. And I think that's one of the struggles we have at De La Guerra Plaza also, actually, that the softness and the cooling factors of the green. I love the Channel Island play structure, and I'm going to stand by my support of water features. I love them. I love them with my children. I've gone to places in Oregon, other places, just to go see their meandering pathways and their water features, because they're such an asset, and older people like them too, and they're just the sound of them and the cooling feature of them. And then if I could, there are a few things that just, maybe I could end with this. On the August 29th meeting, and maybe we could send the memo out to the committee of things that are being considered in the short term, but definitely looking at deep cleaning, designating pedestrian-only blocks, designating separated bike lanes, temporary, all temporary, but I just want it's sort of an update out, just report out that those are coming to discuss, and also a small, slow, accessible tram or people mover on State Street, and then design standards with HLC. So because those all are important to this body too, I thought I would just report that out.
Thank you. Megan, Councilmember Harmon.
Thank you, Chair Davis. I'm going to be very brief because so much of my thoughts have already been articulated. I will start by, I just want to associate myself, I would say, generally with the comments of Hillary. So much of what you articulated was just perfectly encapsulated my own thoughts. So to the folks taking notes about where we are, I'm just kind of seconding all of her notes. In general, on bullet point 1, in terms of the vision and how it's been presented today, I was absolutely thrilled to see this. I mean, I think that has been pretty much universal from what we've heard. Of course, there is so much to be done. That goes without saying. But I think for me, speaking for myself personally, seeing what we have here and hearing the discussion that has evolved from the presentation feels almost like for the first time we can see how this moonshot grand plan could come to evolve. And so that just from a philosophical perspective is one of the most exciting things, to really see sort of the beginning of that generational change, generational plan coming to fruition. So my appreciation sincerely for getting us here, and obviously to the public and committee members as well. So I'm 100% on the vision, and I think it's been well articulated, the things that work. On the unique districts, I also really like the 3 districts, and I thought about the 2-district idea, but I'm sold on 3 myself. And one of the things I was thinking as we were going through this is I've heard a couple of times some concern about the length of the promenade. There's no promenade this long anywhere in the world. That's a problem. Well, I think when you think about it in terms of these discrete districts, sorry, I forgot what we were calling them, these discrete districts, you begin to see how something different, something uniquely Santa Barbara, something that is unlike other places in the world could come to evolve. And so I really appreciate that, and it begins to, I think, give some structure to this long promenade that's unlike anything else in the world. So I really like that. I was really happy to see that. And for me, what began to percolate is how can we translate what exists now into something innovative and truly Santa Barbara. So I really like it. And I think the boundaries worked as well for me. I guess I will continue to think about that, particularly the questions related to the upper boundary at Sola, but I didn't have any concerns with that initially. I really like the concept of the civic district, and I very much agree and had this note, as well as Vice Chair Saxon did, that we define what this is. I mean, I absolutely love that. And I think one thing that will be critical, and I'd be interested in how this might play out architecturally or design-wise, we will evolve also. Santa Barbara will evolve. And that's one of the challenges that I see in this space. What we are today is not what we necessarily will be in 10 years. So how do we define a space that can continue to evolve with us, and that the civic discourse of our community can continue to be reflected in that district? And so when we talk about flexibility, I think of the 3 districts, there is no district where flexibility is more critical than in this civic zone, if only so that as we evolve and as our community changes and our interests or whatever it looks like, that it can continue to be reflected and alive. And I think that to me is the key. I don't have the answer for what that is, but I think that's the word that comes to mind. As we define it today, we need to have that flexibility so that tomorrow can define it as well for themselves. I really like, and I'll just say, because I have it written down here, I too love water features, and I want them. I want a lot of them. My kids want them desperately, and we don't mind getting wet. So I really like that. But it does have to work in conversation with the other water feature. That goes without saying. So I loved the Channel Islands idea. The opportunities for play just really spoke to me. That may just be my life phase, but it really did. Let's see, where was I? In terms of investment, I see currently that significant investment, probably the most investment would be into that district, and so I wrote down that I agree with that. The expanded space, I really liked. I like the concept. I don't quite see how it works yet, so I'm open to it, and I think that it could be sort of central to this flexibility that I'm talking about, but I haven't yet figured out how that might look, so I take that for what it's worth. I also have a note here, as Councilmember Sneddon said, I didn't love the Old Town name, just a note. And then, let's see, I think Peter Lewis, or maybe it was Kristen, someone brought up just how does retail fit into these districts? I don't know that I agree with the idea of a shopping district per se, but I didn't see much conversation between how retail would work and the designs that we saw. So I don't know if that comes in the form of kiosks or something else, but that as a consideration for me, how it fits together, what the integration looks like is of interest. I agree on the connecting and enhancing the connection along Anapamu, but what did I write here? yes, this is a lower priority for me in the scheme of things, if we're talking about investment and, you know, where I would see the heart of this effort, but it would be great. On the gateway, I too agree that something needs to be done there, but I was really taken with Suzanne's note about all the different gateways that are utilized in our community, and I think if we continue to foreground that in our thoughts about this street and the districts, we will really be well served, and it'll keep us sort of thinking in a 360-degree way. And so I really, really appreciate that and made a note that I continue to remember that as well, and I think that'll help us be more sort of thoughtful and holistic in our planning. A couple of general notes that I just want to echo very, very briefly. Of course, Marge's comments about affordable housing and adaptive reuse, and Diane's as well. Yes, I mean, you know, I'm all in. I also appreciated, someone said, I don't know who, that our history in the communities is not an overlay, but a foundational part of this process, and I really liked that and want to emphasize that. And then finally, I have a note about restrooms as well. So that's it. Thanks.
Great. Thank you, Megan, for your comments. Councilmember Jordan.
You know, it's taken me years to fiddle with my little console, so when I push it to speak, I don't get an acceptance if it's after her. So it's purposeful than that. Oh, terrible, horrible. So I'll meander through that, but I'm not really going to address all those things. So I think first, great progress since the last meeting. So thank you to staff, thank you to MIG. I walked out very disappointed at the last meeting, as I think I barked at everybody, and I will walk out barking happily at the end of this meeting. I think we're definitely on the right path. I think the kind of let's start thinking in a direction, the vision kind of thing, I think is right on. Devil's in the details and how we get there and that kind of stuff, but I think so. As regard, I'm going to look for Ed so he doesn't kind of hug me. I'm intrigued by Ed's comment on maybe 3 districts is too much, but then I'm thinking maybe 4 is the right number. So where I see the problem there is that I see a cultural historic district starting at De La Guerra and going for a couple blocks where it's very intense and cultural and historic. So maybe really what I have a problem with is not the 3 districts, but the framing of that part of the district being called civic and not being called civic and something else. So I don't know, but I don't think the area that you've outlined at civic is predominantly civic. I think it's shared with a lot of Presidio grounds and other historical stuff like that too. So I'll leave that to you to resolve. And I'm going to skip that design changes and that kind of stuff. Let me just go through my notes, and then I think I'll get most of those. And these are out of order, of course, too. So I like the one example you showed of some zigging or zagging, and whether that's zigging or zagging or meandering, where we could get away from that with fire approval. I know there's a crowd out there that likes sitting uphill on State Street and looking for a long direction down State Street. And 100 years ago, you could see the water before all the trees in the buildings. But I kind of like the meandering kind of whimsical part of it too. I really, really like the change from linear in the middle district, as you have it right now, to where it becomes a focus on crossways type of engagement rather than linear. I think that's a really cool idea that breaks it up and changes it so it's just not the same for 12 blocks. In regards to the gateways, I'm not a big signage fan. Don't need another sign in Santa Barbara, I don't think, but something you could do there with icons, whatever, some type of architectural, statuesque, certain trees, whatever, a combination of all of that. And I agree with all the comments you've heard about they aren't just at the base of State Street. There are other places too, particularly crossways. And if you can find a way that could be replicated, I mean, who would have thought that we would be moving into the rock pile to build the hotel and shopping center 50 years ago, but that's where we're going. And so there will be other eventual gateways to a city that sprawls out in that direction or some direction too, where you'll have to reconfigure your gateways. I like Michael Becker and Peter Lewis's comment on the 10-foot sidewalks, but I'm hesitant to adopt moving the food and beverage away from the building because we don't control the state laws regarding where I can walk and deliver an alcoholic beverage. But if that was resolved, I think moving them out there offers the most flexibility for both the sidewalk and the most flexibility for having those taken down to do programming in the street where you need more than 20 feet. So if somebody's really going back to parades on State Street, that'd be the easiest. You just pick up your tables and chairs and umbrella, fold them up and put them away, and all of a sudden you've got a 40-foot avenue for parades. Had the same question on, are we talking about or identifying a retail core? And I assumed from the way I saw it, it was going to be the civic district. That seemed to be the sense I had when you changed to a crossways kind of thing. But I think, as they're wont to say, I think you need to study that some more and explain what that looks like and feels like and what we want to do. I love the repeated comments on moments of joy and play. And as the team knows, for me barking at them, anything we're doing to emphasize a park-like setting and environment on a former street will have my full support. And in fact, I made a note on that slide that talked about areas of agreement. I just wish we would lose the phrase, keep State Street closed to cars like I'm defending the Alamo, okay? And find some other way to say where we're all going, which is like emphasize streets converted away from constant vehicle use, okay? So it's already sounding, it just continues to sound offensive the longer this goes along when you say, that's our goal. Put the gate down and keep them off the street. I just think that language needs to change. I'm going to take credit for your breath going away. As the team knows, I barked at them like if we were looking at a 50-year plan, why the hell aren't we just knocking down all those buildings on the east side of State Street in front of De La Guerra Plaza, and what would that look like? Now it will put some breath back in your lungs because one of those buildings on the corner is a historic building, so we would have a problem. But we could leave that one there and knock all the rest of them down. But so I want to thank you for including that graphic, because I think if you're really thinking like what if, that is a big what if. And if you went anywhere else in the world and talked about a plaza, that is exactly what you'd look like, a big plaza fronting on what is really the front door of in terms of use and look, for me anyhow, of City Hall. And then, you know, if we can save the building where the news press is too, you've just got that whole plaza just kind of looking at you and embracing you. I like the idea of the Anapamu extension, and I think you should study other places where you could do that too, and I'll just give you 3 examples. East Cannon Perdido is one, and it might actually be 2 blocks, not 1 block, because when you start to look at, again, where the historical footprints are, when you're leaving State Street on East Cannon Perdido, and you would actually go 2 blocks, where I think you're looking at Presidio properties. And then West Victoria, same type of arrangement, I think, in terms of the theater district and dining opportunities. And then my wild card is West Victoria, which everybody will say, well, why West Victoria? That's where Wildcat is for you younger kids. But it's sitting right... Oh, that's what I said, didn't I? West Ortega? So anyhow, you're looking at a building across the street that I'm convinced will come down one day. The Macy's building will go away. And I would certainly be really upset if the redesign of that area did not include some type of open open space or plaza right in whatever gets developed there, as the Hotel Californian was designed to look, but maybe not look like presently with its little corner fenced off. But looking for places where future opportunities, like old Beacons buildings kind of things, or just those old buildings that you know are they going to come down, what's on the other side of the street of them, and that can that be a potential little pocket plaza or something else, or a plaza or a parking space, and then can you draw a perpendicular connection into that from State Street? I'll continue to harp on paseos, not where they are now, but where they could be. Again, I'll use my example of get out of the City Hall parking lot, you walk through the News Press parking lot, you walk through whatever that parking lot is between the two buildings there. You then walk through the Lot 10 driveway. You walk out the back side of that, and you're behind World Imports on that paseo right there, and boom, you're already down against 5 restaurants. And where are we missing those opportunities where there's a parking lot, or where there will be redevelopment, or even on your picture that you had where those blue lines ended somewhere, and why can't they get through why can't they get through from that block to Chapala, and what can we do to incentivize that? And then, kind of interesting enough too, on that same subject, where have businesses already taken up a half block deep with an outdoor patio? And so I would say like M Special, whatever's in, what are you kids going to have to help me? Shaker Mill area, right? Back in there, right? So you know what I'm talking about? So, you have a frontage on State Street, but you walk through that frontage and all of a sudden you're half a block deep and you're in an outdoor patio that is as big as the frontage building on State Street. So where are there opportunities there also at the mid-block to work off of those patios that seemingly will be there for a period of time too? They're already an open space in the middle of the block, but they're an island, so how do you connect those open spaces out and back to the other blocks? I know you want to talk about transportation at another time, but that graphic on the 400 block of State Street, I think, needs to be clearly depicted up front, because I'm of the impression that that street will have to remain open going one way towards the water for vehicles at all times, regardless of what design we're using. So if that's true, I think we fess up now on that graphic and show that that block is going to have vehicles on it and all the time, and what are we going to do with them? How are we going to make them look there? Might be some people in the room who want to make sure we talk about housing. Like the restrooms need to be integrated into State Street and not buried in the basement of a parking structure. That's like the worst choice ever. For the dad stays out in the street with the boy, the mom has to go walk into the cellar of a parking garage with a daughter to go find a restroom. They need to be out and in front. Like the idea really much of shared outdoor spaces too, and I think the more you can integrate those two, then the more you can reprogram them when you need the space, if they're out away from the building. And then, final comment, I know you're putting these pieces together, so they make sense. You can take off the little bites, but when you're ready to start folding the pieces together, I think you're going to have to give just as much time as you were as for a regular topic. Just case an example, if we decided that something was contradictory in one subject to another one that we decided the same thing, you're going to hear me say, well, that's because you made me only talk about the one part of it, not the transportation part, just the mobility part. And now when we're talking about transportation, well, I kind of like this for transportation, but when you fold them together, they don't work together, because so all of that will need to have ample opportunity to talk about how the previous agreements we came to all fold together in the big picture. They can't just be assumed that we'll pick some of them that people agreed on and others of them that people agreed on, but ignore the way they integrate. So, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Michael. So I get last word, I guess. Since my thumb has been on this scale for 2 months, when I go down these items, yes. Literally, that's my comment, because I've been working with these guys to get to this point, and I really appreciated the dialogue and the comments that you all gave today. This was, I thought, very, very productive. What I'm hoping is that the team will take this, go back, synthesize it, hit the major points of consensus, the other points that we need further discussion on, and hopefully then circulate a draft to us as a committee, so that we all see what came out of tonight's meeting ahead of going forward in that regard. So that's it for me. I don't think we're going to try to do anything else tonight. I think we've run out of our, I think we run over our time, as best that I can see, in that regard. But I wanted to thank you all and the public, because they did basically come out, which we've been asking them to stay involved, and they have stayed involved. So thank you all in that regard. I'm looking forward to our next meeting, which will be scheduled soon.
Yes, so I wanted to make a couple announcements before we close.
Go.
We are tentatively looking right now at September 11th for the next meeting. It would be an afternoon meeting, likely starting around 12 p.m. or 1 p.m. I'll get you the exact time and confirmation of the date very soon. But if you do have a conflict around that time frame, if you could please email me directly and let me know. I'd want to make sure there are enough SSAC members so we can hold that meeting. That will be the transportation overview and history for State Street and the downtown area in terms of transportation that Public Works staff will provide. And that is really sort of an intro as we talk through some of the mobility questions around concepts. The next meeting we are looking at is tentative for October 9th. So I will finalize that and send that out to you all shortly, but if you could hold both of those dates, September 11th and October 9th. The October 9th meeting likely will be in the evening, or in the afternoon starting around 3 o'clock. That one I would hold, I do believe that'll take probably similar time frame to what tonight was, so I would hold 4 hours. And then we do have a regularly scheduled meeting, I think it's October 23rd. And then we have another meeting scheduled for December 11th, so please hold those dates as well. We may add a November date. I think that's probably pretty likely, and I will let you know when that date is also.
Great, thank you, Tess.
October 9th is Indigenous Peoples' Day. I think it's a holiday. Just.
Sorry, what did you say?
October 9th is a holiday.
Okay, I did not realize that. Thank you for letting me know. So that, I will look at October dates and get back to the group.
Great, okay, great.
You got my email on that police department thing too on the 11th, right?
I did. It's anticipated to be in the morning.
You'll talk to them? Good.
I did, yeah.
Okay, I'm just going to make one editorial comment as chair. Hopefully in the mobility discussion coming up at our next meeting, that discussion facilitates the visions and the concepts we've talked about tonight and doesn't attempt to dictate solutions in that regard. In other words, how do we make this work? That's where I'd like to go. Okay? Okay, with that, I'm going to thank you all again, wish you a good evening, drive safely home, and we will see you soon. Thank you, staff. Thank you, MIG.